I'm Shazad Haq with some of the stories that made the headlines this week. We begin in Singapore, where car COE prices have hit new record highs to nearly $94,000 for cars up to 1,600cc and electric vehicles with up to 110 kilowatts of power. Turning to scams, more than 190 people have lost some $162,000 to e-commerce scams involving baby products so far this year. Police advise people shopping on social media platforms to be careful. In property, at least 300 people have lost around $1.7 million so far this year to scammers posing as property agents. In happier news, NUS and NTU are again the top institutions in Asia based on global rankings by subjects. In the latest QS World University rankings, NUS is in the top 10 for 14 subjects, while NTU is among the top 10 in 5 subjects. In world news, Paris continues to be rocked by protests as hundreds of thousands took to the streets to protest the government for pushing through legislation to raise the retirement age. Over in the US, 8 celebrities, including actress Lindsay Lohan, had been charged by the US Securities and Exchange Commission for touting cryptocurrencies on social media. And a group of TikTok content creators have protested at the US Capitol against the government's calls for a ban on the Chinese-owned video-sharing app. Here in Asia, the Philippines is facing a water crisis, with some 11 million families lacking access to clean water as the dry season approaches. In Thailand, police shot dead a gunman who killed 3 people and wounded 3 others in a 15-hour standoff. And finally, in sports, sprinter Shanti Pereira has made world athletics history by becoming the first Singaporean to top the governing body's women's 100-meter outdoor rankings in Asia. And that's your news wrap from the SPH Media Newsrooms.
This is Money FM 89.3, Singapore's most influential radio station. Time check on Money FM 89.3.
9:03.
Weather.
The Met Service is calling for thundery showers over many areas in the afternoon today. Much the same for tomorrow, Sunday as well. Our high today, 34 degrees. Our low tonight, a pleasant 24. That's your Money FM 89.3 weather. Enjoy your weekend.
Traffic.
And do you want the good news or the good news? There are no traffic updates to report. First time. There was some traffic earlier. It seems to have cleared. Let's hope it stays that way on this glorious Saturday morning, folks. Of course, always yin and yang. Woodlands Causeway is a traffic jam. 50 minutes into JB. Oh, no, it's just gone up to 54 minutes into JB. They're all listening to Money FM, and 90 minutes into Singapore. Twice 55 minutes into JB, 16 into Singapore. As always, folks, maintain your beloved lane discipline.
Lane discipline, 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 discipline.
And that was your traffic right here on Money FM 89.3.
If you see anything on the roads that we might have missed, you can share it with us via SMS or WhatsApp at 8855-0893. But please send the message through only when you are safely parked. Helping you grow your money on Money FM 89.3. Money FM 89.3. Financial updates from the Business Times.
I'm Chua Tian with some of the market stories that made the headlines this week. The U.S. Federal Reserve had on Wednesday raised interest rates by 0.25 percentage point, but the central bank indicated that it was on the verge of pausing further increases in borrowing costs after the recent collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. Seeking to reassure investors on the soundness of the banking system, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said the management of Silicon Valley Bank had failed badly. He added that the bank's collapse did not indicate wider weaknesses in the banking system. Looking ahead, Powell told a news conference that officials were still intent on fighting inflation while also eyeing the extent to which recent bank failures had caught demand and slowed lending. And Switzerland's financial market regulator, FINMA, had defended its decision to impose steep losses on some of Credit Suisse's bondholders on Thursday, saying the decision was legally watertight. Now, according to FINMA, the AT1 instruments issued by Credit Suisse contractually provide that they will be completely written down in a viability event, and in particular, if extraordinary government support is granted. And the move came as Switzerland announced a multi-billion franc takeover of Credit Suisse by UBS. The deal involved a 16 billion Swiss franc write-down of the lender's additional Tier 1 debt to zero, while shareholders received some compensation. And Singapore's factory output contracted more sharply in February, dragged by a steeper production decline in pharmaceuticals and electronics. According to the Singapore Economic Development Board, industrial production fell 8.9% year-on-year in February, down from 3.1% in the previous month. Now, this marks the fifth month of contraction. Excluding the volatile biomedical manufacturing segment, output fell 4.9% year-on-year. And on a seasonally adjusted month-on-month basis, output shrank 11.7% in February, compared with the previous month's 0.4% contraction. And excluding biomedical manufacturing, the decrease was 8.1%. And that's your finance wrap here on Money FM 89.3. I'm Chua Tian Tian.
Those were your financial updates from the Business Times. This is Money FM 89.3, Singapore's most influential radio station. Saturday morning, only on Money FM 89.3.
Good morning and welcome to Saturday mornings here on Money FM 89.3. It is 9:07 on your Saturday morning. Glenn and Neil with you all the way up until noon today. Good morning, my friend, on a cool morning. The rain's been with us and against us and everything, but it's feeling a little bit better now that things are starting to re-green a little bit.
Re-green is the word. Good morning to Glenn. Good morning to Max doing the production duties this morning.
Woohoo!
And good morning to all of our wonderful listeners. I have to agree with you. The weather has been close to perfect. And it's not often I say that because we've had sunny mornings, yes,
Yeah.
quite warm. But in the last few days, some rain in the afternoon just to cool things down and green things up, as you say.
I got to tell you,
What's not to like?
I was in your neighborhood yesterday afternoon up near Senkong and Yishun, and driving back into the city by Seletar Airport, and I had to slow down to about 20 kilometers per hour. The rain was so hard.
It came down, didn't it?
It was unbelievable. It was biblical how hard it was raining up there.
Where was you near Seletar Airport? Sometimes I cycle going towards Yishun Dam.
Yeah, I was coming back from kids' school. XL,
right, I know where you are.
Yeah, World Academy. Yeah, right across. And getting back onto the CTE.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was
There
hard.
was a spell. There was a spell where it got a little frantic.
So anyway, but all good news for our green plant friends around. So I got to say, the stupidity of people never ceases to amaze me.
No, nor me. There's an expression. Someone never got rich overestimating the stupidity of people or something.
So case in point, and we'll just call this segment "How dumb do you have to be?" ? Two men filmed themselves vaping and smoking in a Sentosa cable car recently, and then they did a TikTok on it. They posted it on TikTok. And so what do you think happened? This it was on the 19th of March. The police saw it.
Of course they saw it. You're doing the job for them.
So sure enough, they got busted, and now they are quote unquote helping with investigations.
Yes, helping themselves to a nice fine.
Now, Neil, look, okay, we can't say that we haven't done a few silly things in our day back in the day.
We could feel the show
Easily, right? And but I mean, really? You're going to do something blatantly illegal like that, and there are cameras in those gondolas anyway.
Yeah,
what is with people?
It's like,
what do they think?
It's like doing an armed robbery and putting it up on Instagram live. Why? And whatever your thoughts on it, the fact remains: vaping is illegal in Singapore. You can get charged up to $2,000 as a fine per offence. There's all distributing such products can lead to jail terms, and you stick it on TikTok. Have you not followed the news this week? Do you not realize China watches everything on TikTok?
Everybody watches everything, and the both men are 24 years old apparently, and so then the
24. It's just 24. They're not kids. These are grown men. I was living in Singapore by the time I was 24. I was writing my first book when I was 24.
Yeah.
What are you doing? You're grown men.
So the HSA, the Health Services Authority, obviously looked up these gents and found them. You're not going to hide in this town, right? And went to their residences and found a total of 11 vape, e-vapes, and 16 related components. So like they got a whole little thing happening in their houses. I'm like, duh.
Well, same week, you've just reminded me of another story. Same week, and I'm not making light of the offences. Did you see that drug bust? And kudos to the Singapore police, who I think it was in Bedok. I'll find the story. But the guy, how many times have you seen this? He goes out the window and tries to escape via a window on, I'm going to say, the 4th or 5th floor of an HDB flat. Where does he think he's going to go? They watch too many Tom Cruise movies.
Exactly right. Like, hey, I'll just parkour down the outside of the building.
I'm Jason Bourne. I'll just climb down the walls of the aircon units.
These guys
Where do they think?
Just ridiculous.
Oh, it's astonishing. I saw one just coming in today. Topo North. How many times have you seen this? A sweet, I'm putting in inverted commas, a sweet, benign uncle shuffles across the road. It is red man. He should not be going. Car turns into Topo North, has to slam on the brakes, toots the guy, quite rightly. The shuffling uncle just looks at the guys in the car and gives them the finger. Like it's all their fault for existing. These people.
For driving in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing.
Exactly. The entitlement of some folks.
Well,
add that to the occasional dumbness, as you mentioned, and it's good fun. It's good fodder.
If you're not laughing every now and then at the things you see that happen in real life, you're missing out, because there's some stuff that just goes on.
Honestly, these guys generally who are filming stuff on TikTok or Instagram and are not putting two and two together, whether it's fights or vandalism or graffiti, or vaping, it's happening all the time. I mean, if I'm a police officer, I just swipe my phone. I'm solving more crimes than Sherlock.
Don't even need to walk the beat, as they used to say, right?
Sherlock and what was it, Poirot and the little grey cells. Just little hand phone will do it.
Oh man, yeah. People, if you do illegal things and post it on social media,
you will get caught.
You will get caught. So
honestly,
just FYI.
Vaping on
anyway,
TikTok.
How's the rest of your week going, man? You had a good show last night with Dan.
We did.
7 to 9.
Lots of fun. Yes, Dan is being very helpful to me. I'm just about okay now with the panel, give or take, which is what Glenn Van Zutphen manfully does every week. Yeah, we had a good fun show. People calling in, winning prizes. Yeah, great.
Nice.
Great fun.
Nice.
Everybody's loving my story. Fright Night Friday.
Oh, this story about your Aunt Sally was just, I tell you, let's talk about that
later,
a little bit later. But Neil has got a great story for
which will upset my mother, because I know she listens to the weekend morning show.
Sue, you can't not tell this story.
It's a classic. It's a classic. She knows it's a classic.
Yeah. Which it also reminds me of another ghost story that I grew up with.
Right.
So I will tell you about that.
We'll do that
a little bit later. We got a great show coming up, folks, including in just a moment, we're going to be talking about Sentosa and the future of Sentosa, the guest experience there, a new marketing campaign. So that's coming up in just a couple of minutes' time. Steve Oaken's going to be joining us at 9:30 from Los Angeles, the City of Angels, where he is currently for our international news review. And this new Xi-Putin bromance popped up this week, as did TikTok in the US.
I am absolutely fascinated by the TikTok story.
I think we're going to talk probably mostly about that
so
today.
Many things.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first to say it. Call me ignorant. I don't really care who the CEOs are of most companies. I only found out this week, like many Singaporeans, that he was actually Singaporean, because he keeps such a low profile. Fascinating story, that one.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that. If you'll stick with us or come back to us for our 10 o'clock hour, and we hope you do, James Walton's going to be with us in studio. Now, we've had James on before. He's the Southeast Asia Sports Business Group leader for Deloitte. And Deloitte is a huge sponsor of the women's football here in Singapore,
which kicked off last weekend. And it's one of the positive sports stories in Singapore. It's gone from an initial 7 teams to 10 teams. It's one of the few professional leagues in Singapore, or sports leagues cities in Singapore that are actually growing and actually expanding. And part of it is because of corporate sponsorship. And the thing I love about James, he doesn't hold back.
Yeah.
He expects Singapore businesses to step up and do more.
If I recall correctly, Deloitte invested about $300,000. I don't know
season.
if that's the current number, but we'll ask him.
We'll check with James.
But he's going to talk about why it's important for local businesses to step up and probably chide them for not stepping up.
And also mention that what you'll get back.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just some charitable enterprise. He will say there is a return for companies, and he'll talk about that later.
Can't wait to hear from James in our 10 o'clock hour, 10:15. At 10:30, we're going to go virtual to Amy Wei, who is the Senior Director of Product for Trip.com. Now, Trip.com has a new online it's called TripGen app. It's a real-time travel guide. And everybody, as we know, is interested in getting out and about. We'll talk about your upcoming trip a little bit later on, Neil. But so we'll have Amy on to talk about Trip.com's new virtual travel guide. Wow, I want to get that out all in one piece. It's still early.
Brilliant. And at 11:15, I'll be doing beautiful
yes.
places. I went with the National Heritage Board on Thursday and discovered their new revamped Topayu Heritage Trail. And as I'll say later at 11:15, I was very, to use a local term, very Howlien about it. I was very arrogant in the sense that, guys, I've written 3 books.
And you lived here. This is where you first dropped down.
Everybody knows I lived in Topayu for 10 years. Impress me,
Really?
enlighten me.
Oh,
That
nice.
was my attitude, in the sense that show me something I didn't already know.
Yeah.
And credit to the trail.
Wow.
They did
Awesome.
several things, and I'll talk about them at 11:15.
Can't wait to hear about it. At 11:30, our old friend Jason Dacey, the founder of this show,
Indeed,
also the founder of Cockatoo Media, is going to be with us joining us from Australia. We're going to talk about a number of things, including today. There's a big state election there in New South Wales. Why it's important to Singaporeans who might travel there or go to school there. And then we got some other topics around Australia that we'll discuss.
I'd be interested to know if the ruckus about AUKUS, is still making news over there. The white guys ganging up on China and words to that effect.
Very, very interesting. So much is happening around, and we want to get started right now. Where are we doing?
We're going to Sentosa.
We sure are.
Singapore Homebrew on Money FM 89.3.
And Singapore, good morning to all of you listening here and also around the world. At Sentosa, they have a new marketing campaign happening there. We want to talk to Mira Bahrain, the Divisional Director of Marketing and Guest Experiences at Sentosa. Mira, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're most welcome. How you doing? What's going on at Sentosa? New marketing campaign.
Sentosa Land.
Yeah. What's tell us about it.
Yeah, that's right. So as you know, we celebrated our Golden Jubilee last year. So as we wrapped up, it's timely for us to refresh our brand. So it's more of a rebranding, I would say, rather than a campaign.
Okay.
So as we look into the future, where we will continue to introduce diverse facets of the island, including lesser known and new leisure experiences. So I'll just share a couple of examples, and I think many of the listeners might be familiar with this. So for example, Sentosites, which is a range of heritage themed tours that help our guests discover the island's nature, heritage, and marine life. Explorers of Sentosa, which was created by the renowned Copenhagen-based recycling artist Thomas Dumbo. And we just recently announced actually a series of low carbon leisure experiences. And the main one upcoming is the Tiny Away Escape at Lazarus Island, which comprised of 5 sustainable tiny houses for short-term stay. This will actually extend the getaway from Sentosa so guests can better appreciate the island's rich flora and fauna. So we feel it's quite timely for the brand to refresh. It's a great timing for us to better communicate our experiences and how guests can discover Sentosa.
Wonderful. Mira, you mentioned the getaways that you've built at Lazarus Island. Now, I'm very curious to know more about that. What has the take-up been for that? What is the response been to that? Because it's a very unusual and very new initiative for Sentosa's Islands.
Oh, it's actually just been announced, so we haven't officially launched it yet. And it will be open, I think, for guests to book starting in May, I believe.
Okay.
So right now it's just been announced. We do have a couple. We'll get media over soon, probably next month. But it's starting up in May, and we've gotten so much interest from various groups. So we reckon that it'll be quite booked up.
Well, we know where we'll be doing the show from in May. Coming to you live from Lazarus Island.
We can organize that.
We would love to. And of course, the original low carbon activity on Sentosa, just going down and hanging out at the beach.
Perfect.
Let's not forget that, right?
Of course. Exactly. Yeah.
Now, you said it was time for a brand refresh, and you also had done a survey on some of the attitudes and opinions of people going to Sentosa. Tell us a little bit about what some of the findings were with the people that are actually using Sentosa.
Yeah. Well, look, I think Sentosa, we do numerous, consumer studies. We're always looking out to keep updated to what the trends are out there. So similarly, during COVID, actually, we conducted and commissioned the survey and really want to know what Singaporeans' attitudes towards leisure time and see whether, it has shifted post-pandemic. And we found, a couple of things that are consistent before pandemic and some things are a bit different. So I would say the main one is that the survey reaffirmed our notion that having leisure time for yourself, the whole 3 in 4 respondents agreeing that leisure time helps them to find the space to discover themselves to be their best.
It surprised me only 3 and 4.
Contrast when we did.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Mira, only 3 and 4 people agree that leisure time is a good thing. Like, why isn't that 4 out of 4? Like, what is that one person thinking that said, no, I don't think leisure time is a good thing?
Yeah.
That is Singapore for you.
Well, I'll tell you what, in contrast though, before when we did it in 2019, 70% revealing that Singaporeans are actually stressed out by the idea of not doing anything during their spare time. So so 3 to 4, it's an improvement. Whereas before, folks were feeling like, I need to be doing something. I cannot waste time, right? So I think that's something that we found quite enlightening. Having said that, we found that 70% of the respondents are still struggling to find time for leisure.
Mm-hmm. So added to that, Mira, okay, so you've got a slight paradox there. More people want leisure, but they've got less time for leisure. How do you accommodate that? The advantage of Sentosa is you don't need to get on a ferry or a plane to get there. It is nearby. It is accessible for those short-term leisure breaks, day trips, or whatever. So bearing all that information in mind, what are some of the things you are preparing for or planning for in 2023? Mira, are you still there? You've just switched off your microphone. You need to turn it back on.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. Hey,
okay,
you're back.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Sure.
I was just going to say, you mentioned Sentosa Land earlier. So let me speak a little bit about that. We kind of want to extend the experience, of the island also to the virtual world. And basically what Sentosa Land is a reimagined version of Sentosa that offers a fantastical experience on land, air, sea in the virtual world. Sentosa Land is hosted on roadblocks featuring key areas of the island, and we encourage guests to rediscover Sentosa. We tried venturing in the sort of world of AR and gaming during the pandemic, when we actually created virtual Sentosa on Animal Crossing. And that was a huge success because it allowed guests who can't actually visit the island to still have a piece of the island experiences, from the comforts of their own home. This is a little bit different, obviously, because, markets are open post-pandemic, but we still feel like we want to extend this sort of experience to our guests. And I guess if I might add, what's different with Sentosa Land is that we actually collaborate with our business partners on the island so that guests who actually get on Sentosa Land can actually unlock some treats for them to actually redeem on the real Sentosa Island themselves.
We're talking with Mira Bahrin, the Divisional Director of Marketing and Guest Experience, Sentosa Development Corp. Mira, I think it's the end or the beginning of April, the fee comes back to drive on to Sentosa. First of all, is that still the case? It's been gone now all during COVID. There was no fee at all, free to drive on. What is that fee going to be? And are you concerned at all that that's going to impact the number of folks that want to go to Sentosa?
Were you asking about, can you repeat that question again?
Sure. Yeah, I think at the beginning of April, the fee is going to come back for vehicles that want to drive on to Sentosa. First of all, is that still happening?
Oh.
Second, how much will it be? And third, are you concerned that might impact the numbers of people that want to go to Sentosa? You there? Got some bandwidth problems.
Yeah, it got a
there
little
you
bit choppy there, but I think I got grabbed that you were talking about the island admission. Am I right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Look, I think Sentosa Island admission fees has been waived since March 2020 to encourage more locals to visit the island with their families and loved ones. This was a temporary measure to support local businesses in view of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we all move towards living with COVID-19, this temporary waiver will be reinstated April 1st, as you mentioned, but it's not changed from the fees that was there pre-COVID. But here's a little tip, especially for the listeners this morning. We actually, if you know, Sentosa has an Islander membership. I don't know, Neil or Glenn, if you're on that, but you should be on that.
I'm one of the original members.
Great.
I joined when it first began decades ago.
Same.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Well, if you are a member and if you are an insider tier member, which means you need to clock about 400 points, you will get into the island for free. You will continue to get into the island for free, 365 days a year, plus with all the other goodies that comes with the membership. And specifically for this week, if you use the promo code Island 400, that will upgrade you straight to an insider tier. Oh. And you can continue to get into the island for free.
Nice.
That's good news for you.
That's
You
only
go
going to
every
be
Sunday.
valid for this week. The promo code.
Island 400 or Island 40?
Island 400. So Island 400.
Got it. Oh, that's great news. That's great news.
That is indeed. Yep. So apart from that, what else have you got lined up for 2023, Mira, for Sentosa? And she appears to have frozen on us again, unfortunately. Are you still there, Mira? We can just about hear you. There you are. So what have you got planned for 2023 for Sentosa?
Yeah, okay. Sorry, but for 2023, we'll continue actually with, our rebranding efforts, bringing more new experiences and fantastic campaigns and promotion for our guests. Just a bit of a glimpse of what's going to be a new beach club opening, which is Tipsy Unicorn Beach Club, the first beach club for Tipsy. That's slated for May 2023. We've announced this also before. Raffles for first VIP hotel end of the year. The Palawan at Sentosa, which is Shangri-La's group upcoming lifestyle precinct in the Palawan beach. And of course, our Centryscape, which is the first milestone of the Brani master plan, and that's expected launch towards the end of the year in 2023.
Wow.
So just to recap, I heard that we've got the Tipsy Unicorn Beach Club coming in Celoso Beach next month. You also said the Raffles Sentosa Resort and Spa and the Palawan at Sentosa, an upcoming lifestyle precinct at Palawan Beach, and the Sentosa Sensoryscape, which is the first milestone of the Sentosa Brani Master Plan.
Awesome. Mira, we have to leave it there, but folks can get more info at sentosa.com.sg. Please feel free, Mira, to put any links that you'd like for Sentosa in our Facebook Live chat. We'd love to see those. Mira Bahrain, Divisional Director of Marketing for Sentosa Development Corp. Thanks for being with us today on Money FM.
Thank you, Mira.
Thank you very much.
Take care, Mira.
If you'd like to listen to any of our interviews again, all you need to do is Google Money FM 89.3, Saturday mornings, and podcast. There you'll find all of our interviews for you to download, share with your friends, or listen to whenever you'd like.
Saturday morning. Money FM 89.3. Traffic.
And there's been a blackout at Pradle Road Junction, not too far from here, so do be careful there. Roadworks on the SLE towards the CTE after Upper Thompson Road. Also on North Canal Road towards New Bridge Road after South Bridge Road. Avoid the right lane. In fact, all across that River Valley downtown area, there are roadworks this morning on the causeways. 55 minutes into JB at Woodlands, 18 into Singapore, and also at Tuas Second Link. It's 51 minutes into JB and 15 into Singapore. And you know what you must do on the causeways. And this goes out to Fuchi Ren, our regular listeners. At all time, lane discipline.
Discipline.
Very good.
If you see anything on the roads that we might have missed, you can share it with us via SMS or WhatsApp at 8855-0893. But please send the message through only when you are safely parked. Saturday morning, only on Money FM 89.3.
International News Review.
Welcome back. Time to join our regular Steve Oken, joining us from Los Angeles today for the International News Review. Steve, welcome. How's everything in the City of Angels?
You know, if Neil was doing the traffic for Los Angeles rather than Singapore, he'd be going on a lot longer. We'd still be in the middle of the traffic report.
For hours and hours.
Is it that bad, Steve? I mean, I've seen the TV, I've seen the movies. Is it that horrendous?
Only for 16 hours a day or so. There's about 8 hours where there's no traffic. But for the 16 or so, it's pretty bad. Yeah. And let me just say, I'm in Los Angeles and it's great, but I'm headed to New York on Sunday, and Donald Trump warned of potential death and destruction if he is charged in Manhattan. And I'm going to be right near that courthouse. So I don't know if I'm looking forward to New York next week as much as I am Los Angeles.
Please don't die or be destructed, Steve. We like you too much.
or do any of the destructing.
Yeah, or do any of the destructing. Of course, this saga has been talked about for a week now. It was supposed to happen last Tuesday. So, Trump's just trying to drum up whatever. But
it wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't supposed to happen last Tuesday. Trump said it was going to happen last Tuesday based upon nothing. So yes, exactly. Let's consider the source.
All right. Hey, let's talk about TikTok. That is the hot topic. The CEO of TikTok was testifying before Congress on Thursday. The U.S. government is very very concerned about TikTok and government employees using it and blah 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 blah. Take us where are we right today? And there's been a lot of follow up to that Thursday testimony in Congress as well.
Hey, look, the question is, can a Singaporean save TikTok? Right? I mean, you have, Mr. Chu, the CEO of TikTok, trying desperately to distance TikTok from China, saying he was born in Singapore. He lives in Singapore with his wife, who happened to be born in Virginia, and their 2 children. He attended business school in the U.S., so did everything he could to distance TikTok from China. He couldn't do it. And look, he had a really tough case to sell. And, when the opening of the hearing is the chair of the committee, Kathy Rogers, a Republican from Washington State, she opens her remarks by saying, TikTok is a weapon for the Chinese Communist Party to spy on you. And you are talking to Mr. Chu, your platform should be banned. It's going to be really tough to save it.
On that point, Steve, what I found fascinating, and I watched it, I found it completely engrossing. It was very different to what I remember a few years back. Do you remember, Glenn, when Zuckerberg was called up?
Yeah.
It was embarrassing. It was really boomer time. There were guys on the committee who didn't even seem to know what the internet was, let alone Facebook. This felt very different. Firstly, it was bipartisan. Secondly, it was very driven, very targeted, very well researched. They were not holding back here. And I almost felt there was something more to it than just political national security interests. Are these guys just protecting their business interests? Is there an element of that as well?
I don't think so as much as it unites everything. It unites, Democrats and Republicans united against the Communist Party of China. So you have that, but there is a lot of concern about social media, not just TikTok, but a lot of concern about social media when it comes to people's mental health, when it comes to children and teenagers being addicted to it, when it comes to having it to be an ability to bring out false claims and drive negative and false perceptions against the U.S. government, against people. So it's put all of that together, but wrap it around China and the Communist Party, and it is different. I mean, in fact, one of the Democratic representative said that the CEO of TikTok was one of the few people to unite the committee, comparing him unfavorably to Zuckerberg. So it is pretty bad.
But that was my point, Steve. The emphasis has been on security. I'm no apologist for TikTok, by the way, but I'm just looking at it from both sides. Every time I switch on my phone, people know where I am, what I'm doing, what I'm buying, what I'm eating, whether it's Facebook, Instagram. I only have to search for something on Facebook and the algorithms kick in and I'm getting 50 other things like that. This is nothing new. This perceived breach of data, this threat to personal security, this feels almost entirely political driven. Would that be fair or not?
No, I mean, look, there's a difference. There is a difference national security question when it comes to a company that is owned by China versus a company that's owned in the United States. And look, he was asked, what happened? Why is it that your company has spied on journalists in the United States? And he said, well, I don't think it was spying as being the right way to describe it. That was not a very good answer to that particular question. When asked, does the Chinese government, if they demand user data, will you be compelled to give it to them? And he didn't have a good answer to that question because Chinese law does compel it. So there is a difference here between Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Twitter and
Sure.
TikTok. Now the question is, what does that mean legally in the United States? What will Congress do? Those questions are open right now.
Yeah. And look, I mean, not to beat the dead horse here, but there have been plenty of cases over the decades where the FBI has been spying on American journalists. And, look, the internal surveillance system in the U.S. is nothing to brag about.
And external with the CIA.
And external and everything. As always, the person who is doing the accusing, they are the good guys, and the people who are accused are the bad. One man's freedom fighter is another man's rebel, sort of concept. So we get that, and we're in a political season.
But there is a difference. I mean, the Chinese law states that it is the first obligation of any Chinese company that its obligation is not to the shareholders, it's not to the customers, it's to the Communist Party. And at any point in time, the data can be asked for. That is very different than when in the U.S. system. Well, sure, the government can go and get a warrant and do surveillance, and it will do those things. There's a difference between that and what the legal system is in China. And the question is, how are you going to address that difference when you've got 150 million Americans on TikTok? And that TikTok is an incredibly, beyond popular app. It's the most popular app in the United States. Yeah. And so that's what Congress is grappling with right now. It's what the Biden administration is grappling with right now. And look, the CEO, did not do a great job to address the legitimate concerns on top of the politics that are involved, no question.
Can I just have one quick one? And this is a sensitive one that you may not be able to answer, but he did make the point several times. It is a Singapore-based company for the most part. That was his defense. What are, if any, the possible ramifications for Singapore in all of this, as he's literally using Singapore as his defense card?
Well, look, and he had an issue going in because on the eve of the hearing, the Chinese government said it will not allow a sale of TikTok. So if the Chinese government is saying that, then how can you say it's a Singapore company if the Chinese government has control and veto over it? But Neil, no question, this is going to be a concern for companies because Shine is headquartered in Singapore now. It is on its face held by a Singapore firm, which is its holding company. But is that going to make a difference to the U.S.? So, where are you headquartered? What makes you a Chinese company, an American company, a Singapore company? I mean, that is a real challenge for all businesses now. But it's why you do see Chinese businesses coming to headquartered in Singapore. TikTok is headquartered in Singapore for a reason. Shine is headquartered in Singapore for a reason, because
China?
it is better.
Sorry,
I mean,
you said China?
Shine is headquartered
Shine.
in
Excuse me,
Singapore.
Shine.
Right.
Thank
Shine
you.
is headquartered in Singapore for a reason, because it is advantageous vis-a-vis being headquartered in China when you are trying to do business in the United States or globally.
Yeah, we don't want to say China is headquartered in Singapore.
Well,
that will set off all kinds of red flags.
And look, if I had $1 over the decades for how many times my friends said to me, "Oh, you live in Singapore. What's it like to live in China?"
Well, exactly. That was my point.
I mean, Americans, let's face it, are not always the brightest on their geography.
And I really believe Singaporeans and Singapore could do without this right now. I got to be very honest; they could do without this right now.
Okay, we got to move on, Steve, to a bromance. The bromance between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. Xi said his dear friend Vladimir, as they conducted their 2-day meeting in Moscow on Tuesday evening. It's just love all around, isn't it, for these guys?
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, I'll say this is a very much one way, and it is Putin needs Xi much more than Xi needs Putin. So this is they do come together clearly because China is trying to create a different global system than the one that we have today, the more of the Western system that's been in place for decades. Xi Jinping wants to create a alternative to that. This Russia being his biggest partner, but it is a junior partner in the relationship, and I think you saw that in what happened in Moscow. You saw that Putin pulled out all the stops. Yet at the end of the day, China didn't give up much to Putin, but Putin needs him much more. So it is a bromance, but it's a big brother, little brother bromance.
But speaking of big brother, I mean, Xi Jinping did say change is coming that hasn't happened in 100 years. Very forthright. The Americans saying it's quite belligerent. If you read the comments coming out, I think Blinken said it and other Americans, they're very concerned about this, shall we say, belligerent tone. Are those fears justified, or is this just an ongoing rhetoric between US and China?
No, this is much stronger rhetoric than you've ever seen coming out of China. He has said the U.S. is engaged in an all-around containment, encirclement, and suppression of China, and that this is bringing unprecedented severe challenges. And to counter this pressure, you have Xi giving Putin political and economic support, and certainly giving him cover for the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I mean, Putin has been accused credibly of war crimes, and yet Xi Jinping goes to Moscow to visit with him, doesn't mention it, of course, rather says this is not a military aggression by Russia, keeps talking about this is in Russia's protection because of Western encroachment. So yeah, I mean, the rhetoric is very different now, and the actions are very different now, yet still Xi Jinping has not crossed the line. China hasn't crossed the line in giving lethal assistance to Russia yet in support of its invasion. So we're still not there yet.
All right. Oops, sorry about that. Steve, let's move. We will keep an eye on that situation. More U.S. firms are more negative about doing business in China. A new study by the American Chamber of Commerce in China. I guess this isn't really much of a surprise, is it, Steve?
Well, I mean, it is evidence when the AmCham in China says U.S. companies are more negative than they've been in a long time about doing business in China. It shows that the increasing tensions between the U.S. and China have made business very challenging there. It's Ukraine, it's COVID, it's Taiwan, it's TikTok, it's semiconductors, it's all of that. And that's resulted in the U.S. having U.S. businesses who are surveyed where China is no longer regarded as a top 3 investment priority by a majority of U.S. companies doing business in China. So it is significantly different today than it was certainly pre-COVID.
And taking that into account, plus the recent news with TikTok, plus Glenn's point about the stereotypical close relationship between China and Singapore, does that have any impact on businesses setting up in Singapore, possibly being headquartered in Singapore? The fear of being associated with China, rightly or wrongly, or will it have no difference?
Well, no, I mean, it's having a huge difference. First, it's having a huge difference as American companies say this, Chinese companies say this. So you see Chinese companies being headquartered in Singapore now. Obviously, TikTok and Shine being two prominent examples of that. You certainly see U.S. companies diversifying out of China with their supply chains, and otherwise, you see headquarters coming out of Hong Kong and moving to Singapore. But you have to keep that in the context that China remains an incredibly important market for U.S. companies, U.S. businesses, and U.S. investors. And so you're not seeing, just people leaving, lock, stock, and barrel out of China, but you're seeing a diversification out of China. But boy, it is just so much harder to do business in China today than it was years past. And that's what the AmJam survey finds.
Yeah, and there will apparently be some additional regulations brought in by the U.S. government later this year, sometime this year, to further make some of those transfers of technology or products or goods and services, another level of the CFIUS response there from the U.S. side. So we'll keep our eyes on that as more comes through. But I want to finish out our international news review today very close to home. And that is a UN think tank has come out and said that Singapore is the top bottled water consumer globally now. Each person in Singapore spent 1,800 Singapore dollars and consumed 1,100 liters of bottled water in 2021. These are staggering numbers, Steve, especially compared to Australia, which consumed 500 liters per person.
Oh, look, Singapore has a vision of becoming a zero waste nation. Yeah, how is it ever going to get there when Singaporeans spend more money on bottled water globally than anyone in the world? We just heard that that there is going to be a tax to go onto Sentosa. So they're going to make people pay to go onto Sentosa. Why can't you apply that logic to bottled water? Why can't you apply that logic to plastic bags? I mean, there's got to be a lot more substance put on individuals from the government when it comes to becoming that zero waste nation that Singapore has a goal of becoming.
In fairness, Steve, this often comes from a position of kindness. I was at a couple of events this week, and I know this has happened to you and Glenn before, where I was automatically handled, past bottles of water. Happens all the time. Happens at schools, happens at events, happens at meetings, from well-meaning folks, but when tap water isn't accessible. Plus, the second thing that I think has been lost here, our proud hawker center culture can't be underestimated because there is no tap water accessible at a hawker center. So for the most part, Singaporeans do drink at home and they do use their own tap water and they boil it and use it. And schools also use their own water bottles. Is it more broadly a unique aspect of our culture, our hawker center culture, and this kindness to give out bottles at events?
Why is it that Singapore is one of the last countries in the world, certainly one of the last, major economically developed countries in the world, that doesn't have a tax when it comes to plastic bags, right? I mean, and
that's coming,
something
by the way, that's coming.
It's coming, but why has it taken so long to put a tax on this? So the government can be doing a lot more to put the infrastructure in place so that people will be carrying around water bottles. If you carry around a water bottle, you'll have the chance to fill it. You go into gyms now. A lot of gyms have banned, plastic cups there. You want to drink water in a gym? Bring your bottle. If you don't bring your bottle, then you're going to have to go home and get it, or you're going to do a workout without water. You can do the same thing almost anywhere. So I think it's going to take some real government leadership here in terms of making it easier for people. Then there's other ways. There was a professor at NUS said, let's embarrass people, like when it comes to using plastic bags. And he said, let's put a graphic health warning label, like you have these graphic health warning labels on cigarette packs to deter smokers. You see, the diseased lungs and this stuff. Put images of distressed marine animals trapped in plastic waste on plastic bags, and then let people carry that around and remind them what their behavior is causing. So there's so much that can get done in Singapore. I mean, it's got the right policies in place. The government talks about setting the right targets, but now you've got to you have to nudge people, but then you also have to have a little bit of a stick as well to change behavior.
I was in a 7-Eleven the other day, and I never take the plastic bag that they don't even offer anymore. They just automatically put stuff in plastic bags. That's the first thing. Why can't businesses ask, do you need a plastic bag, right?
Yeah. It's almost like the upsize culture. You've got to stop telling people, do you want it upsized? You know, they've got to ask for it.
It's got to be an opt-out rather than an opt-in, right?
Exactly.
But this person in the queue in front of me bought a small bottle of water, not a big one, a small bottle of water, and then had them put it in a plastic bag to carry away.
The double bagging is my favorite.
Yeah. And I said to the person, I said, as politely as I could, excuse me, do you really need a bag? Can't you just carry that? Their hands were not full. And the person just looked at me like I was from Mars. Like, what are you talking about? Of course I'm going to put it in a plastic bag and walk away with it. So there is a mindset culture here, culture mindset that is just is way out of whack. And I'm giving myself the last word. Steve, we got to go.
Yeah, I'll give you the last word. The largest market for bottled water is still the US. So you don't get off scot-free.
Per capita.
Not per person. Not per person. It's incredible, Singapore. People buy over 1,100 liters of water per person. So, Glenn, that person you saw would probably have to do that like 2 or 3 times a day, like for all year to hit what the average here is. No. Singapore is off the charts in the use of plastic water. And look, I get it if the drinking water wasn't safe. I mean, look, everybody. Look, Prime Minister Lee could drink new water. Maybe he can say no more plastic water bottles.
Well, and this is the other point, and we do honestly have to go, but Singapore has the best public drinking water supply on the planet.
Has the best recycled water. I drank new water at my book launch.
There is absolutely no need. It's not like we're living in some third world country where the city water is bad. Anyway, Steve, we got to go. Have a great time in LA. Are you back in Singapore next week?
No, I'm at New York for 2 weeks, and I'm going to go see Billy Joel tomorrow. Sunday in Madison Square Garden. So I'll be thinking of you.
Have a great trip. Have a great concert. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
You got it. See you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
International News Review.
If you'd like to listen to any of our interviews again, all you need to do is Google Money FM 89.3, Saturday mornings, and podcast. There you'll find all of our interviews for you to download, Stories that made the headlines this week. We begin in Singapore, where car COE prices have hit new record highs to nearly $94,000 for cars up to 1,600cc and electric vehicles with up to 110 kilowatts of power. Turning to scams, more than 190 people have lost some $162,000 to e-commerce scams involving baby products so far this year. Police advise people shopping on social media platforms to be careful. In property, at least 300 people have lost around $1.7 million so far this year to scammers posing as property agents. In happier news, NUS and NTU are again the top institutions in Asia based on global rankings by subjects. In the latest QS World University rankings, NUS is in the top 10 for 14 subjects, while NTU is among the top 10 in 5 subjects. In world news, Paris continues to be rocked by protests as hundreds of thousands took to the streets to protest the government for pushing through legislation to raise the retirement age. Over in the US, 8 celebrities, including actress Lindsay Lohan, had been charged by the US Securities and Exchange Commission for touting cryptocurrencies on social media. And a group of TikTok content creators have protested at the US Capitol against the government's calls for a ban on the Chinese-owned video-sharing app. Here in Asia, the Philippines is facing a water crisis, with some 11 million families lacking access to clean water as the dry season approaches. In Thailand, police shot dead a gunman who killed 3 people and wounded 3 others in a 15-hour standoff. And finally, in sport, sprinter Shanti Pereira has made world athletics history by becoming the first Singaporean to top the governing body's women's 100-meter outdoor rankings in Asia. And that's your news wrap from the SPH Media Newsrooms.
This is Money FM 89.3, Singapore's most influential radio station. Time check on Money FM 89.3.
10:03.
Weather.
The Met Service is calling for thundery showers over many areas in the afternoon today. Much the same for tomorrow, Sunday as well. Our high today, 34 degrees. Our low tonight, a pleasant 24. That's your Money FM 89.3 weather. Enjoy your weekend.
Traffic.
And there's been a vehicle breakdown on the KJE towards the PIE after Tua Chu Kang Drive exit. Roadworks on Jalan Eunos towards Hougang after the PIE. Another vehicle breakdown on the AYE towards the MCE after Benoi Road exit. Avoid lane 3. On the causeways, gridlocked 1 hour and 2 minutes into JB from Woodland 16 into Singapore. And at Tuas Second Link, a little better. 33 minutes into JB, 19 minutes into Singapore. And as always, at all times, what do we want? We want
Lane discipline, 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 discipline.
It gets better every time.
If you see anything on the roads that we might have missed, you can share it with us via SMS or WhatsApp at 8855-0893. But please send the message through only when you are safely parked. Helping you grow your money on Money FM 89.3. Money FM 89.3. Financial updates from the Business Times.
I'm Chua Tian with some of the market stories that made the headlines this week. The U.S. Federal Reserve had on Wednesday raised interest rates by 0.25 percentage point, but the central bank indicated that it was on the verge of pausing further increases in borrowing costs after the recent collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. Seeking to reassure investors on the soundness of the banking system, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said the management of Silicon Valley Bank had failed badly. He added that the bank's collapse did not indicate wider weaknesses in the banking system. Looking ahead, Powell told a news conference that officials were still intent on fighting inflation while also eyeing the extent to which recent bank failures had caught demand and slowed lending. And Switzerland's financial market regulator, FINMA, had defended its decision to impose steep losses on some of Credit Suisse's bondholders on Thursday, saying the decision was legally watertight. Now, according to FINMA, the AT1 instruments issued by Credit Suisse contractually provide that they will be completely written down in a viability event, and in particular, if extraordinary government support is granted. And the move came as Switzerland announced a multi-billion franc takeover of Credit Suisse by UBS. The deal involved a 16 billion Swiss franc write-down of the lender's additional Tier 1 debt to zero, while shareholders received some compensation. And Singapore's factory output contracted more sharply in February, dragged by a steeper production decline in pharmaceuticals and electronics. According to the Singapore Economic Development Board, industrial production fell 8.9% year-on-year in February, down from 3.1% in the previous month. Now, this marks the fifth month of contraction. Excluding the volatile biomedical manufacturing segment, output fell 4.9% year-on-year. And on a seasonally adjusted month-on-month basis, output shrank 11.7% in February, compared with the previous month's 0.4% contraction. And excluding biomedical manufacturing, the decrease was 8.1%. And that's your finance wrap here on Money FM 89.3. I'm Chua Tian Tian.
Those were your financial updates from the Business Times. This is Money FM 89.3, Singapore's most influential radio station. Saturday morning, only on Money FM 89.3.
Welcome to our 10 o'clock hour here on Saturday mornings, Money FM 89.3, 10:07 on your Saturday morning. Off to a good start already this morning, my friend. Lots of folks commenting on Facebook Live.
I enjoyed our chat with Sentosa. And if you missed the chat or you only heard bits of the chat, not to worry. We do clean these up. And the silences and the pauses and the hanging parts all get scrubbed out and you get a fresh podcast released.
Fresh and
clean and uncut. And well, actually, no, it is cut. It's cleaned up. It's completely cut. But you'll get a fresh take on that Sentosa piece later. And Steve, of course, is always good value. But we got lots of comments about Steve when we were talking about TikTok and the congressional grillings that the TikTok CEO went through this week. I'm trying to find the comment now. Have you got it there? Oh, yes. Xian Yang Milei Lee said, it would be great if Steve Okin is less propagandist and one-sided, and this program needs a more balanced set of speakers. Xian Yang, I'll be the first to admit that no one is more paranoid about the fact that we have three Angmos talking about international relations than me, especially someone who's written 7 books about Singapore, which is why I made the point of asking Steve about why TikTok. Why is TikTok being singled out when other apps, companies have had access to our data for years? So I do like to think we try to give balance where we possibly can. That's what we do.
Yep, indeed. I mean, and I think all of us have been in the region between 20 to 30 years. So I think we've definitely seen things happen not only in Singapore, but in Hong Kong, Tokyo, and around. And we do try to bring those points on. But you know what? Maybe we can get a Chinese person on.
It's not for the want of trying.
Yeah, we have tried over, honestly, we have tried. I would love to get somebody from the Chinese embassy to come on this show and talk to us. And we've reached out at various points over the years, not recently, to be honest, but over the years. And it is hard to get somebody to come and actually talk to us publicly.
And on that point, if you remember, I invited TikTok on the show several times.
We've invited TikTok.
I think their Book Talk initiative, and this is not hyperbole, I think their Book Talk phenomenon did as much as anything to save the book industry. I genuinely believe that. I'm not the first person to say this either. Without Book Talk, my daughter wouldn't be the voracious reader she is now. Plus, Book Talk just got a whole generation of young people, young adults, that 13 to 16-year-old block of readers who generally don't read for pleasure. Their readership falls off a cliff. But because of the hashtag Book Talk global phenomenon, you couldn't go in a bookstore anywhere in the world without them having a Book Talk section. Even Kino has one, Times has one, Barnes & Noble in the US, Waterstones in the UK. That was purely driven from the ground up by teenagers going on Book Talk, hashtag Book Talk, and just creating this whole reading global phenomenon. And no one was more appreciative and grateful to see that happen. That was all down to TikTok.
Yeah. Well, we've had Kishore Mahbubani on many times. He talks very eloquently about China and its place in the world. And believe me, he is no U.S. propagandist when it comes to talking about China. And we've had other academics. So look, I think we have to realize that it's not just the only segment we've ever had on talking about China. We've had numbers over the years.
No.
And having people on. Are we able to have a counterpoint on every show? We're just not able to do that just based on being able to book guests. It just doesn't happen.
But I take the point that I genuinely make a point of pushing back pretty hard against Steve sometimes, because I'm mindful of the fact we've got a couple of Americans here. We've got a third Angmo in the room.
Yep.
So I always push back. Athanasios has said, funny how you mentioned TikTok and the trolls arrive. Everybody's welcome, Athanasios, on this show. Both sides, both viewpoints. We welcome all.
Jane Iyer, welcome back, Jane. Bottled water, talking about our bottled water segment, is ridiculous in a country with an excellent water supply. We don't give out bottled water on Jane's tours anymore. And she says, don't get me started on plastic bags. I've written to Cold Storage and others about this for years. No progress at all. Remember they tried to do, what was it, Bagless Wednesday or something?
Yep.
And the outcry, it was like you were, killing babies in the streets or something. Like people couldn't get their free plastic bags on a Wednesday. It was just ridiculous.
Exactly. Even that one, I was going to push back on Steve slightly, not from a nationalistic perspective, but from a class perspective. Because when he was talking about, bless him, air-conditioned gymnasiums no longer having bottled water, that's a very middle-class perspective. Let's get it right. Hawker centers is the food of the working man and woman of Singapore.
Sure.
Now, when you go to a hawker center in Singapore, the drink stall for years was the stall that made the most money, because everybody, no matter what stall they went to, would buy a drink as well. So it was always the idea that that would be the consignment you would want. You would want the drink stall. Every Singaporean knows this. That has changed slightly in recent years, because people like me now take my water bottle along to hawker centers, which I know puts a few hawkers' noses out of joints. We can't lose sight of this. So yes, I want to save the planet. I'm a proud environmentalist, vegetarian, blah, 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 whatever. But I'm also mindful of the fact that stall holders are still trying to make a living. So we have to be careful not to overly apply a middle-class perspective here to what is working hawkers making a living. That is where a lot of bottled water in Singapore is sold. There's no getting away from that. Schools. I've been to more schools than just about everybody. I've been to more than 100. They all have take bottle policies.
Yeah, all the kids must.
You're hardly selling any bottled water there. Most workplaces have water coolers. It's our outdoor food eating culture.
Well, and look, we're a huge mice destination.
That's got to stop.
But I will tell you, I would say at least 50%, maybe 60% of the time that I go to a conference now, it's glasses of water on the table and pitchers of water.
Correct.
It's
but
not bottles
that's
anymore.
The easiest fix. That could be 100% tomorrow. That's the easiest fix of all. That one.
Now, of course, during COVID, there were questions about health and safety. Do you want to have a pitcher of water on the table that somebody who had COVID might have touched, and blah, 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 blah. I think that's largely gone away, but that certainly should be done everywhere tomorrow.
I agree.
I agree. Anyway, Don Pierce joining us from Washington. Don, again, great to have you in town last week. If you can't do good due diligence without Chinese staff being rounded up by police, it's over. I'm not exactly sure what he was talking about, but anyway, Athanasios, great to have you on as well.
Don said also the issue regarding TikTok is the civil military fusion model, which would definitely allow the Chinese government to force ByteDance to turn over data. That's the issue that is the most pertinent, salient issue. This idea that because ByteDance, never mind TikTok, ByteDance is the parent company. Chinese influence, as Steve said, right? They have to work with the Chinese government when any decisions are made. That's the complicated area here.
And the one that a lot of U.S. Congress people have been raising. Will Bott, talking about our Sentosa segment. Good morning. How do we redeem the code for the Sentosa Islander upgrade? Island 400 is the code, but I'm not exactly sure how you actually do it. I would guess you go to the Sentosa website or the Islander website. There is an Islander website.
I did look. There are a few parenting and money tip sites that do mention it, but it's not the official Sentosa site. If you just Google Sentosa 400, there's plenty of sites that tell you how to redeem.
So hopefully you'll be able to figure that out. Rob Salisbury, good morning. Good to see you back on East Coast, back from Australia. Christopher Chang. Hi, Christopher. Aloysius. Fuchi Ren. Good morning to everybody. Glad you're with us this morning.
Lovely. Keep all the comments coming, especially the next segment we've got coming up. Sports sponsorship in Singapore. Is there enough of it? No. And we're going to find out from someone who does literally put his money where his mouth is.
Singapore Homebrew on Money FM 89.3.
Joining us now to talk about the Women's Premier League in Singapore kicked off last week with 10 teams, a big jump from the 7 teams in previous years. And talking us through that whole scenario is James Walton, the Southeast Asia Sports Business Group leader at Deloitte. Deloitte sponsors that league. Great to have you with us back in the studio. It's been a number of years we've had you on, but we've always had to have you on virtually. So good to have you here, James.
Yeah, nice to be back in person.
Yep. And we're just going to make sure we can hear you properly. Talk us through the opening of the Deloitte Women's Premier League last week. How'd it go?
Yeah, I think it was an interesting opening. As you say, 10 teams instead of 7. So 5 games over the weekend across 2 locations. And a couple of exciting new teams, particularly there's a Tampines JSSL team now, a joint venture between Tampines Rovers and the JSSL soccer schools. And they had a stunning opening weekend. They delivered an 8-0 drubbing over the weekend. They've got some exciting players over there, as well as Geylang entering on the women's game for the first time. And interestingly, Police Sports Association, who were previously such a powerhouse in women's football for many years and didn't take part last year, but played in the Women's National League and have now applied to join the Women's Premier League and came back up and have a lot of ex-national players playing for them. So it's going to be a very competitive league this year. It's looking good.
Nice.
And as Glenn mentioned there, you've jumped from 7 teams to 10 teams, one of the few positive sports league stories in Singapore. How and why has that happened?
Well, it's partly because there's some guidelines globally coming out of FIFA around what we call club affiliation, which is really about how clubs have to have a women's team now in order for them to be considered to be clubs within the international framework. So every SPL club is now required to have a women's team. So that is why Tampines Rovers have, as I say, paired up with JSSL. Geylang have obviously developed their own team. But beyond the SPL teams, and of course we don't have Young Lions and Brunei, but beyond the SPL teams, we have teams that only exist in the women's side, like Tong Baru, for example. And so I think there's a lot of young ladies that have started playing. I think there's a lot of girls coming out of JC, coming out of universities that want to play football at the moment. And I think there's a real opportunity here. I'm not sure we'll ever get to more than 10 just because of fixture congestion and the quality of player that you want to have. But somewhere between 10 and 12 is about the right number for the next couple of years.
Just to follow up on that, James, only personal experience with my own daughter has suddenly had no interest in football and in the last 18 months has become football mad. You know, she follows the fixtures, the injuries, both locally, internationally. What do you think has changed? I have my own theories, but what do you think has changed in the last few years with regards to women's football and young girls taking the sport so much more seriously?
I think there's a combination of factors. I think the first thing is the international coverage, and we saw obviously a fantastic World Cup and European Championship in the last couple of years. We've got the World Cup nearly on our own doorstep in Australia in the summer this year, and so I think that exposure that has helped. And I think some of the news stories around this in terms of equal pay and some of the kind of Megan Rapinoe and her kind of comments out there have helped with some of that as well. But I think a big part has been how the major teams, the Barcelonas, the Real Madrids, the Premier League teams have really started to support their women's team, to give them equal coverage. If you go to a Premier League team, so you know, Neil, I'm a Tottenham supporter for my sins. You go to the Spurs site and you see their goal of the month competition. Their goal of the month competition now has the women's goals alongside the men's goals, competing in that competition, which was never the case a couple of months ago. But I think we've also benefited that our own local journalists have come to the fore, and I think particularly Straits Times deserve a lot of credit. They're sending reporters down to the stadium, and the community has helped as well. So I think there's a lot of people coming together around this, But the most important thing is there is finally a voice. There is finally awareness. People are finally talking about it. You can find it in the news. You don't have to go search. And that makes it a lot easier for everyone to get engaged.
We're talking to James Walton, the Southeast Asia Sports Business Group leader at Deloitte. And Deloitte has put $300,000 into the Deloitte Women's Premier League for their sponsorship. Is football for women a viable career path at the moment, or are all these ladies still doing other jobs to support themselves? Can they make a living wage? Let's put it that way.
Is sports for anybody in Singapore a viable career
Well,
path at this point? I mean,
sure.
the nature of Singapore is, technically speaking, the only professional athletes are the men's football players, and
Right.
and as Neil alluded to, there's not many teams in that league in the first place. There are a few other athletes who, thanks to their sponsorships or thanks to specs funding and things like that, don't have to work. But in the women's game right now, there is nobody who doesn't have to work. There's nobody earning enough money in the Women's Premier League right now. One of the good developments this year, one of the teams, Lion City Sailors, of course, have started paying their players on a somewhat of a contract basis. So some of the teams pay an allowance, which is basically for training. We call it kind of grab money, right? $20-$30 per training. So that is a common kind of thing now in the league. But Lion City Sailors have gone one step further and actually started paying a monthly amount, which basically, as long as you attend 50% of trainings, 75% of trainings, you get that amount. Now, it's not a huge amount, a couple of $100s, but then you get your allowance on top of that, your appearance fee on top of that. So they can potentially get, $800, $1,000 a month for a player who's coming to training.
Yeah.
I mean, it covers your costs, right?
A historic start as well.
It buys you boots and it pays your costs. And hopefully some of the other teams can start to go that way as well. Because our goal really in the next 3 years is how can we get the league to where you can really call it semi-pro. And how can we get to a point where we have our first handful of professional players? It won't be the whole league, but if we could get a handful, that would be a start. Yeah.
Now, James, you're sponsoring the Singapore Women's Football League. Deloitte is also involved with netball. Is that correct? Netball Singapore. What's the arrangement there?
Oh, so we've been sponsoring netball 7 or so years now. We started out as the sponsors of Pesta Sukan, which is obviously one of the largest community events for clubs, for schools, for the tertiary institutions. And now in the last 2 years, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we saw one or two other sponsors kind of drop by the wayside. And so we stepped in and took up the Super League as well. So we just had Netball Super League season just finished last weekend. We had Brunei and Thailand teams come and take part for the first time to actually join the Super League to help them to boost the game, as well as 6 international players flew in from Fiji, and one joined each of the local teams. Fiji is a very highly ranked team in Asia, so they really add something to the teams as well. And it was a great end to the season. We had great viewership online. We had the stadium at OTH. The stands were really packed out for the final couple of games, and a huge upset in the final. So what more could you ask for?
So my follow-up question to that, sorry, Glenn, is that, okay, you're doing the netball, you're doing the football, Deloitte is flying the flag, a bit of a lone ranger for sports sponsorship. Now, you and I and Glenn, we all know that when the English Premier League teams inevitably come to Singapore and the region post-season, sponsors will be queuing up to be associated with the English Premier League teams. But I've also spoken to those same people about sponsoring local sports, and they've said that's essentially dead money. Clearly, you at Deloitte disagree. What are you seeing that they're not? What can you tell local sponsors listening to this, or potential local sponsors and corporates, why they should invest in local sport?
I mean, you could argue this either way. I mean, to those people that are talking about, sponsoring Premier League and such, you look at Manchester United and you look at the suite of sponsors they have. They have an official tractor sponsor, an official paint sponsor,
noodle sponsor,
everything under the sun. You get kind of lost in that
it's
world.
Diluted. Their dollars are diluted, right?
Unless you're literally, the name on the front of a shirt or something, you get a bit lost in that. And there is just so much noise out there. I think with Singapore sports at the moment, I mean, maybe it's because we're the only one in it. I don't know. It's quite uncrowded, which means there is a lot of opportunity, a lot of noise. The price points, honestly, for corporates are a lot more realistic. I mean, the amount of money you have to spend And I've been involved in sponsorship deals for Premier League teams, asking for sponsors to put the name on the shirt sleeve, never mind the front of a shirt, and they're talking £5 million a year. You can sponsor a sport in Singapore. You look at some of the sports like floorball. Some of their title sponsors are paying $30,000, $50,000 a year, which is really, in the grand scheme of things, for a Singapore corporate, is not a lot of money.
Peanuts.
It's chump change.
Yeah.
And if you can get your staff engaged and they get an opportunity maybe to go down and play the sport, if you partner with these Singapore organizations, because they're a lot more willing to work with you. The Premier League team will tell you, this is your deal. This is what you get. Don't ask for anything more, right? The Singapore sports teams will tell you, how can we help you? How can we activate the brand? They really go that extra mile. They'll run clinics for your staff. They'll offer you the opportunity to partner on different projects that they're doing with the schools and things like that. So for the money that you're putting out there, it's a big opportunity. But I think one of the things people sometimes miss is, for me, if I go sponsor a Premier League team, that's sponsorship, right? But if I sponsor a Singapore team, that's also about community investment. That's about giving back to Singapore. That's about creating opportunities, creating jobs here in Singapore. Man United don't need my money.
Why does it take a foreign firm, Deloitte, to realize this?
We're a local partnership.
Okay, but you know what I mean? I mean, the parent organization, and let's be honest, it's got to be in Deloitte's DNA globally, right? To at least look at this thing.
Yeah.
But, we have so many homegrown companies here. And I know some do some amount of investment or sponsorship at small levels for various events, let's say. Why is it so hard for CEOs to open up their pocketbooks and say, look, for 50 grand, we're gonna get behind a sport. We're gonna get behind netball or tuck roll or whatever it is, and give, even if it's just pocket money, to some of the players. Help them realize some dreams. It boggles my mind. Now, I know it's a small market here, 5.5 million people. And I know the TV coverage is often non-existent or barely existent. So they want to have more eyeballs and all that, but they could surely be using social media. They could stream games online for free. They could do all these sorts of things. I just don't understand why they won't invest in Singapore's young people.
I think the first thing is there's a lot of people asking for your money in this day and age. You get a lot of charities approaching you, a lot of other community projects, and there's a lot of things to spend on. But I also think part of it is actually a problem within the sports ecosystem as well, which is, if you take our national sports associations and you take even a sports association that is competing at an international level, put to one side, football association and swimming and the bigger ones. Your average national sports association, their whole staff is probably 5-6 people and a couple of volunteers. And their ability to pay well and to attract and to retain good people is a challenge in that situation as well. So to have someone out there marketing for you and approaching corporates and saying to corporates, hey, you should sponsor our sport. Here's why. That's a skill set. And
a full-time job.
Yeah, and a full-time job. And whether they have that. So most NSAs actually rely on their councils, their boards, basically, and having, people like me or people from other corporates sitting on their boards. And they will actually task those people with, can you call up all your friends and see who you can get to come in and support? We are not as professional here just because of, we've got 64 different national sports associations in Singapore.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, we're a small country. I mean, there's a lot of challenges out there. And for these NSAs to do that is difficult. And that's why one of the things Deloitte actually does as well, even with the NSAs we don't sponsor, we do a lot of work pro bono with NSAs where we say, look, they come to us and we say, look, we can't sponsor you. We've got too much on our plate. But what we'll do is we'll help you develop your pitch. We run workshops with them about what's your value proposition.
Oh, that's interesting.
Brilliant.
How can you improve your marketing? And then we help them develop a pitch, and we even point them to, hey, you should go talk to this company, that company, that company. And try to see how we can help them find sponsors.
Yeah.
Well, just to add to that, we do have many corporate leaders listening to this show. Tell them, James, what are some of the tangible benefits that Deloitte get on your end from sponsoring these sports?
I mean, your basic level is, as you say, is news coverage, newspaper coverage, things like that. But a lot of our sports as well, they have good social media followings, both the league, but also the clubs that are perhaps in the league, as well as the players themselves.
So you're reaching young
national
people.
Players. So yeah, you're hitting Instagram, you're hitting TikTok in a way that corporates generally don't. Corporates don't always speak the right language to get to those people. So you're getting third-party validation from someone there. It can help you access a diverse pool of talent. We often talk about the Singapore school system. Sometimes it only teaches the right answer. And what we tend to find with athletes is, I always give the analogy that you're a sailor, you're out at sea, the wind changes direction. If you only know one way to sail, you're going to be sitting on the water for a very long time waiting for that wind to come again. So our athletes tend to have a resilience. They tend to have a slightly different way of thinking, a different life experience, but also just the opportunity to do community engagement, to hold events, to get out there, to have staff events that are a little bit unique and a little bit different. So we organize events with Netball Singapore, coaching clinics and
For your
things
staff.
like that, for our staff, for
That's
our staff's
great.
families,
That's great.
things like
Yeah.
that as well. And there are a lot of sports out there that are really, if you tap into it, there is so much they can do with you. You've just got to stretch that imagination a little bit. So if anybody wants to know a sport that needs sponsors, come talk to me. And if you want to know how to activate it, I can tell you what you can do with that sport as well. I would be very happy to point you towards some sports that really need help, but also have huge opportunities.
It's such a no-brainer, Glenn.
Fantastic.
It's such a no-brainer, isn't it, for
James,
corporates?
and I love this idea that Deloitte is in there actually helping the sports that you guys are not directly sponsoring. That is huge. That is free consulting that we don't often find these days. Thanks for your time, James Walton, the Southeast Asia Sports Business Group leader at Deloitte. James, how can they find you if they need to?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I think even if on the LinkedIn for the show, you guys have tagged me in it as well, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I do just have to give one shout out as well to an athlete I'm working with, Edwina Wu, who is a stand-up paddler. You can read about her in the Straits Times, just started, and she's competing today in Pattaya. In a competition, and that's someone that we're trying to get onto the world stage.
Well, when she's back, let's have her on the show.
Yeah. Happy to have her in. James Walton, thanks so much for being with us. Thank you. If you'd like to listen to any of our interviews again, all you need to do is Google Money FM 89.3, Saturday mornings, and podcast. There you'll find all of our interviews for you to download, share with your friends, or listen to whenever you'd like.
towards Bradall after Mount Vernon Road. Avoid the left lane. Let's see the causeways. How are we doing? 1 hour and 1 minute at Woodlands to JB and 18 into Singapore. Twice second link, 32 minutes into JB, 18 into Singapore. At all times, folks, what must we maintain?
Lane discipline, 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 discipline.
Exactly that. And that was your traffic, brought to you by me and Mr. Glenn Van Zutphen, right here on Money FM 89.3.
If you see anything on the roads that we might have missed, you can share it with us via SMS or WhatsApp at 8855-0893. But please send the message through only when you are safely parked.
Heavy departure traffic at Woodlands Checkpoint due to tailback from Malaysia. Delays are expected and travelers are advised to check traffic conditions before embarking on their journey. Motorists are reminded to maintain lane discipline and cooperate with officers on site. Please follow ICA Facebook for more updates.
Saturday morning, only on Money FM 89.3.
Welcome back to Saturday Mornings here on Money FM 89.3, 1037 on your Saturday morning here in Singapore. A fascinating discussion with James from Deloitte. And man, if you're out there, if you are a CFO or a CEO or in the C-suite of a company, please get in touch with James. Find out what he knows about this whole sports sponsorship thing. Let's support our young athletes here.
And again, to James's point, it's not a charitable thing. You get stuff back. I love the community engagement element. I love the staff clinic element. When I was working at a stockbroker's, of all things, when I graduated from university.
You worked at a stockbroker's?
I've got a different life, my friend.
Dude, this is a side of you I've never heard about.
6 months I was there, and at the risk of alienating half of our audience, I knew it wasn't for me. I was making more money in the first few months than my stepfather and my mother combined. And I was straight out of university.
I had no idea you had this.
Now I'm going to insult again half of our listenership. It was the easiest job I've ever done in my life. I was working.
What did you do?
I was working in what they called the settlements division.
Okay.
So after the trades were done on the floor, you would just literally, like what you do on the computer here, I would move numbers from one screen across to another screen. Yeah. It was no more complicated than it sounds. Max could do it, and they kept giving me pay rises. But they offered me a full-time trading program position, which is quite unusual straight out of university. They would have paid me £25,000 a year, which was a lot of money in 1996.
Yeah.
That was when the Singapore dollar was between $2.50 to $3 to the pound.
Yep.
A lot of money. Of course, what did I do? I turned it down to travel to Singapore with nothing but my suitcase, and the rest is history. But the point I was making was at that stockbrokers, which was the biggest stockbrokers in Britain, BZW, their staff training days were brilliant because they always affiliated with something like what James did. So you would do football days and football days and frisbee days and netball days, and it was so much fun. And you take the whole family along, you know, siblings, children, if you're older. So much more fun than, to be frank, just a boring corporate lunch in some stuffy restaurant. It was just fun. Families brought picnics. They played sports.
Yeah.
Why do we not do more of this?
Well,
with corporate engagement, sports engagement.
And
such a no-brainer.
James's point, you know, sport does so many things for people, for individuals, building resilience, building the ability to do different things and to respond quickly to situations. I mean, you know, the list goes on and on. I don't need to go through it. And so even if these folks are part-time sports people, part-time business people, everybody's going to win on this, you know. Rob Salisbury commenting, thanks, James, for your emotional and financial support from Deloitte. Great to have you back on Money FM. Billie Jean King started 50 years ago to have women's tennis recognized professionally. Yeah, because for a long time it was only men's tennis. Thank you very much. And you know, that journey has gone well for women's tennis. Not perfect, he says, but much better than it was, indeed.
And Kelly Cho agrees. Thanks, James, for the pro bono work, guiding the NSAs on how to pitch with the corporates. Good work. Yeah, that was particularly impressive. You get in touch with James at Deloitte, and they will actually prep you to go in to do your pitches.
Unbelievable.
To corporates, because as he rightly said, 64 NSAs, I believe, National Sports Associations, don't always have a big team, certainly don't have a marketing or a corporate department. Happy to give you the advice. to get into the corporate room and get some money for your sport.
Fantastic. Hey, let's get on with our next segment, shall we?
You went very quiet then.
Yeah. It doesn't happen very often, but it does every now and then.
It does.
Let's do our next segment.
Wide World on Money FM 89.3.
It is indeed a wide world, and a wide world means traveling. We all know everyone's been on the road. We've done a lot of travel segments over these past 6 months or so, and getting back into it with Trip.com. Now, Trip.com has a new chatbot in Trip.com that gives live assistance to travelers. It is something that they are calling the Trip Gen, your real-time travel guide. Let's talk to the person who is responsible for that from Trip.com. That is Amy Way, the Senior Director of Product Management. Amy, welcome to Money FM. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Neil, and good morning, Glenn.
Yeah, good morning. Amy, tell us about TripGen. What is it?
Simply, actually, you can tell from the name itself, TripGen is the trip genie. We try to provide a trip genie for all travelers who want to travel, no matter they book on Trip.com or not. So we're using the cutting edge, the AI technology, which is currently very popular, the ChatGPT technology to build a real-time chatbot to answer all the questions.
You're just breaking up a little bit there, Amy. But I mean, as you said there, it's an app, it's a platform to help people travel. It is quite a saturated market. There are many of these things around already. How is it different to existing apps and platforms that give people tips on travel?
I think people when trying to make a travel plan, they need to go around a lot of the travel blog, or they search online or search on different the website for the recommendation for the destination, hotels, where to eat, etc. But nowadays, that when you have a TripGen, that you can just open your app, Trip.com app, and ask where I can find a 3-day romantic trip with my girlfriend somewhere near the sea, and then they might give you a list of their destinations. You can further ask, okay, within my budget, or maybe a 3 hours flight from Singapore, are you able to narrow and something else? You can continue to ask and patience and fine tune the result according to your patient. So that's variable. So this the gene we are able to put back.
Yeah, we're losing you a bit there.
Amy, you know what? We're having trouble with your connectivity. We're going to play a quick song, and we're going to try to call you on your phone, and we'll do this as a phone interview, okay? So don't go away. Stand right by. We're going to do a quick Doobie Brothers song because the Doobies are coming to Singapore here pretty quickly this week. And stand by, and we are going to try to get you on the phone, okay, so we can hear you clearly. All right?
Okay.
All right, thanks. We'll be right back with Amy Way and TripGen.
Hello, Amy. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you. What about you?
There
Can you
you
hear me
go.
now?
Yeah, so far
Beautifully.
so good. Amy, sorry about the tech problems. Again, just give us a quick overview. You're using AI in this new TripGen app to help people find out where they want to go and what they want to do. Is that right?
It is. In the backend, we actually using the OpenAI API try to power back this conversation, the capability. So you can imagine it's something similar to what ChatGPT does, but it's specific in the travel the area, and we try to teach more things than the ChatGPT does because we have more data about users and the real-time data. So this is something we're trying to explore. Is there a better way and also more intuitive to to communicate with our users? That is on our app. So it's just like the trip journey that you can take to anywhere. If rather than you take a laptop, then you open a browser, okay, I'm asked something. It's just not that kind of mobility we want, because travel is all about mobility.
Yeah. And as we mentioned before, Amy, there are many apps and platforms and websites available in the travel market. It's quite a saturated industry. How is TripGen different or better? And maybe just give us one or two examples of how it's different.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest difference is that the TripGen is embedded in our app, the Trip.com app. So when you search, maybe one thing I need to give a bit more background. So we're providing the comprehensive search into the Trip.com app. So you can imagine if I'm searching for something like the Disneyland in Paris, it can be something you are looking for a ticket, entrance ticket, and it can also be somewhere that you find a transportation solution, go to the Disneyland, or you find somewhere to stay, the hotels nearby, etc. So we have a comprehensive search, the search bar in our app in the homepage. You click there. So, okay, I search for the Disneyland. So we have a bunch of different results and you can click from. So that's where we start the TripGen. So we consider people, if they have specific question, you can find something in the comprehensive with so-called the traditional search. But if we have something as the scenario I just mentioned, I want a 3-day trip, the romantic one near the sea with my girlfriend, that the traditional search cannot give you a very comprehensive answer as you want. So we extend ability we use to provide the answer to our users from the comprehensive search. When you search something, you can also see a button there. Do you want to continue your question with TripGen? And then you can enter a page of conversation. You can ask a long questions, a wild questions, and then we have somehow the ability from the cutting edge AI to give you more specific answer.
Wow. We're talking with Amy Wei, the Senior Director of Product Management at Trip.com, and their new travel guide, TripGen, your real-time travel guide. It's an AI-driven, kind of like what we've been hearing about from ChatGPT since last November, a really authentic and involved, engaged app to help you figure out where to go and what to do. Amy, technology is just really, really changing travel in amazing ways, is it not? It looks like Trip.com is really trying to use that as well to make sure that the travel experience is more seamless for people.
Yes. As I mentioned, like we're starting from the comprehensive search, we're already providing that kind of feature to our users. And after you finish the information seeking stage, that you will continue to booking, right? So we are working on to see how we are embedding those product link. I mean that like the Disneyland entrance ticket link when disappear in the appear in the result we're providing to our users, or a hotel link. Then you can just click on the link and go directly to see, okay, is it somewhere that you want to go? Is it somewhere you try to book? So we just try to provide a closed loop of the experience for our user, from information to taking action. And during the trip, okay, you might continue to have other questions, where to eat, or where's the best sports in the cities, etc. So it just in my opinion, travel is a very a complicated procedure from the preparing stage to the booking stage, and in journey stage, there's a lot of questions. You need someone to help you out.
Yeah.
Fascinating, Amy. I mean, you are the Senior Director of Product Management at Trip.com. So bearing that in mind, what are some of the travel trends or changes that you are seeing in 2023?
I think starting from this year, we see the recovery of the travels. I think the capacity of the flight are coming back. We see more the cross-country routes are actually coming back. I think it's just a year that every country are getting out from this COVID things impact, and people start to travel again, and they love the travel more than ever. Because I think the disruption of COVID have already left something in people's mind. Is in this uncertainty world, we need to live the moment. So you need to try something if you love to, and you just go and get out there. So this is the motion that people trying to capture that and enjoy the travel. So this is the trend we actually witness since, especially from this year.
Yeah, Amy, thanks so much for this. Amy Wei from Trip.com. I can't wait to get on and try this Trip Gen on the real-time travel guide. We're planning a number of trips this year, and frankly, I need some help. So look forward to trying your new AI product. Amy Wei, thanks so much for being with us on Money FM today.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
Wide World on Money FM 89.3.
Money FM 89.3 returns with a second season of ASEAN Conversations, presented by UOB. Tune into Breakfast with Lin Lee and Ryan on Wednesday, 29th March at 7:40 a.m. as we speak to Mr. Adrian Au, Head of Business Enablers and ESG Solutions at UOB, on enhancing and implementing sustainable ESG practices. ASEAN Conversations, brought to you by UOB, only on Money FM 89.3.
You're with Money FM 89.3.
Why you look so sad? The tears are in your eyes. Come on and come to me now. Don't be ashamed.
Top news of the week on Money FM 89.3.
I'm Shazad Haq with some of the stories that made the headlines this week. We begin in Singapore, where car COE prices have hit new record highs to nearly $94,000 for cars up to 1,600cc and electric vehicles with up to 110 kilowatts of power. Turning to scams, more than 190 people have lost some $162,000 to e-commerce scams involving baby products so far this year. Police advise people shopping on social media platforms to be careful. In property, at least 300 people have lost around $1.7 million so far this year to scammers posing as property agents. In happier news, NUS and NTU are again the top institutions in Asia based on global rankings by subjects. In the latest QS World University rankings, NUS is in the top 10 for 14 subjects, while NTU is among the top 10 in 5 subjects. In world news, Paris continues to be rocked by protests as hundreds of thousands took to the streets to protest the government for pushing through legislation to raise the retirement age. Over in the US, 8 celebrities, including actress Lindsay Lohan, had been charged by the US Securities and Exchange Commission for touting cryptocurrencies on social media. And a group of TikTok content creators have protested at the US Capitol against the government's calls for a ban on the Chinese-owned video-sharing app. Here in Asia, the Philippines is facing a water crisis, with some 11 million families lacking access to clean water as the dry season approaches. In Thailand, police shot dead a gunman who killed 3 people and wounded 3 others in a 15-hour standoff. And finally, in sports, sprinter Shanti Pereira has made world athletics history by becoming the first Singaporean to top the governing body's women's 100-meter outdoor rankings in Asia. And that's your news wrap from the SPH Media Newsrooms.
This is Money FM 89.3, Singapore's most influential radio station. Time check on Money FM 89.3.
11:03.
Weather.
The Met Service is calling for thundery showers over many areas in the afternoon today. Much the same for tomorrow, Sunday as well. Our high today, 34 degrees. Our low tonight, a pleasant 24. Enter Money FM 89.3 weather. Enjoy your weekend.
Traffic.
And there's an obstacle on the KJE towards the BKE after the PIE entrance. Avoid lanes 1 and 2. Vehicle breakdown on the TPE towards the PIE after Pongal Road exit. Heavy traffic in the CTE tunnel towards the AYE at Cairn Hill Circle exit, not far from Glenn's house. And a vehicle breakdown on the TPE towards the PIE at Seletar Link exit. Causeways, Woodlands, 1 hour and 4 minutes. It's a traffic jam into JB, 17 to Singapore. Tuas, much better, 23 minutes into JB, 18 into Singapore. And at all times, people, what must we maintain?
Lane discipline, 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 discipline.
At all times. It should be the Singapore motto.
If you see anything on the roads that we might have missed, you can share it with us via SMS or WhatsApp at 8855-0893. But please send the message through only when you are safely parked. Helping you grow your money on Money FM 89.3. Money FM 89.3. Financial updates from the Business Times.
I'm Chua Tian Tian with some of the market stories that made the headlines this week. The U.S. Federal Reserve had on Wednesday raised interest rates by 0.25 percentage point, but the central bank indicated that it was on the verge of pausing further increases in borrowing costs after the recent collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. Seeking to reassure investors on the soundness of the banking system, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said the management of Silicon Valley Bank had failed badly. He added that the bank's collapse did not indicate wider weaknesses in the banking system. Looking ahead, Powell told a news conference that officials were still intent on fighting inflation while also eyeing the extent to which recent bank failures had caught demand and slowed lending. And Switzerland's financial market regulator, FINMA, had defended its decision to impose steep losses on some of Credit Suisse's bondholders on Thursday, saying the decision was legally watertight. Now, according to FINMA, the AT1 instruments issued by Credit Suisse contractually provide that they will be completely written down in a viability event, and in particular, if extraordinary government support is granted. And the move came as Switzerland announced a multi-billion franc takeover of Credit Suisse by UBS. The deal involved a 16 billion Swiss franc write-down of the lender's additional Tier 1 debt to zero, while shareholders received some compensation. And Singapore's factory output contracted more sharply in February, dragged by a steeper production decline in pharmaceuticals and electronics. According to the Singapore Economic Development Board, industrial production fell 8.9% year-on-year in February, down from 3.1% in the previous month. Now, this marks the fifth month of contraction. Excluding the volatile biomedical manufacturing segment, output fell 4.9% year-on-year. And on a seasonally adjusted month-on-month basis, output shrank 11.7% in February, compared with the previous month's 0.4% contraction. And excluding biomedical manufacturing, the decrease was 8.1%. And that's your finance wrap here on Money FM 89.3. I'm Chua Tian Tian.
Those were your financial updates from the Business Times. This is Money FM 89.3, Singapore's most influential radio station. Saturday morning, only on Money FM 89.3.
Good morning, 11:07 on your Singapore Saturday morning. Glenn Van Zutphen and Neil Humphreys with you for the rest of this hour. Hope you're having a great Saturday so far. Expecting some rain later on today. It's getting steamy again around town, and anyway, but I think people are kind of getting used to the new regime now, right? Which is clear in the morning, rainy in the afternoon.
Yeah, I'm laughing because you know I do this quiz with Dan on Friday nights.
Yeah.
That was the week that was, based on the week's events, and I always trying to make it a bit playful. So I asked him the question: what was the name of the adult film star linked to Donald Trump's ongoing shenanigans? Right? Obviously, it's Stormy Daniels.
Stormy Daniels, yeah.
So I was just playing silly so-and-so. So I said, is it A, Stormy McDonald? Is it B, Stormy Daniels? Is it C, Steamy something? Is it D, Steamy Windows? So I went from Stormy Daniels to Steamy Windows in 4 names. And I swear, Dad, bless him, almost went with Steamy Windows.
It's actually not a bad name.
Great name. I was very proud of it. So when you said Steamy there, I was taken back.
Well, speaking of which, so last night you did your Friday Night Fright.
Fright Night Friday.
Yeah, which you even had trouble pronouncing last night when I was listening to the show.
Every week.
But you had a story about a one-legged lady.
Yes.
Who eventually beat her husband to death. Not laughing, but it was. You took us through a whole journey. So take us through. Okay, you don't have to tell the whole story again, but
okay, the brief version,
the overview.
When I was when my sister and I were children, my mother used to terrify us, as she would, with this story about Aunt Sally. Now, Aunt Sally was this almost mythical figure in the family that had a wooden leg. She was a one-legged woman. She lost it in 1941 during the war, but it wasn't war-related. But so she lost the leg during the war. And my mother, being sadistic, at bedtime would tap on the sides of the stairs or the walls as if it was a one-legged woman coming up the stairs going, "Where's my wooden leg? Where's my wooden leg?" It was terrifying when you were a child,
kid,
right?
yeah.
And you would hear the stomp of this one-legged person coming up the stairs. And then, to take it to its sadistic end, my mother would choose between my sister or me, and she would creep into our bedroom having gone, "Where's my wooden leg?" And then a voice in your ear would say, "You've got it." And you would leap out of the bed, utterly terrified. So this went on for several years.
Several years?
Yeah, of course.
Oh
my mum
gosh.
still does it.
That's
but
hilarious.
The truth is, it's based on a real woman. My actual great aunt, my mother's aunt, was Aunt Sally, who really did have a wooden leg. And I met her once or twice when I was a kid. I vague memories of her in a wheelchair. Didn't think much of it. Then many, many years later, 1993, my one-legged aunt, listen to this, Max. My one-legged aunt, great aunt, becomes internationally infamous when she kills her husband with a plastic bedpan. For those younger listeners, viewers, a bedpan was
those of you who've never been in the hospital before.
Yeah, those round-shaped saucepan type things that are literally what they say they are. You use them to pee in the middle of the night or whatever. And what had happened was, serious for a second, my uncle, her late husband, who I didn't really know, he was not a nice man. He was very abusive, had lots of affairs, and just would hound this poor woman, even when they were living together in the old folks' home. So out of sheer frustration, he was abusing her. She just lashed out, picked up the nearest thing, which happened to be a plastic bedpan.
And did him in.
Hit him just the once.
That's all he needed.
But being an 80-year-old man, it was enough. And it made international headlines. I looked this week. It was news in the Los Angeles Times. It was news in the Straits Times. Well, it would be, right? A 79-year-old one-legged killer. There's no other way of saying it. So, yes, that was my Aunt Sally. So I do have a killer. All right. She was only convicted of manslaughter, but and she was given a 12-month suspended sentence because the judge was, well, what exactly are you going to do? You're already in a wheelchair in an old folks' home. You're not really a danger to the public.
Oh, my gosh.
The only person you are a danger to, you've killed. We
should bring up the testimony from the court trial.
I shouldn't make.
It's not a funny thing, but it's a
but
funny
it
thing.
is. I mean, even within the family, it's kind of funny. So yes, that's my story of the one-legged killer in my own family.
So when I was growing up, when we went camping, for scouts or whatever, there was a ghost story that we would tell by the campfire about, and the story was, Johnny, I want my liver back. Johnny, I'm on the first step. Johnny, I want this guy coming up the stairs into the room. And the way you told the story last night on your show with Dan, it sounded exactly like that, but just change it to Johnny and his liver, and at the end, the last moment is somebody like scaring you, right? Jumping out at you. And so when you said that story, I was like, this is exactly the story I grew up with. Obviously your story is a little different and takes on a different color with the ending of it.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Let's move on. Hey, what was the first music record that you can remember buying? What do you think it was?
I know it was a single. And it would have been around the time I remember I bought Shaka Khan's I Feel For You.
Oh, really?
Early 80s.
Oh.
Because I still have my 7-inch singles in Singapore.
Huh.
I know Phil Collins and Philip Bailey. Do you remember that song, Easy Lover?
That was a great song.
I
just listened to it this week again.
One of them. And Stevie Wonder's Part-Time Lover. It was around this period. So we're talking early 80s. It may have even been a bit of... Wake Me Up Before You Go by Wham. I have these singles still.
Okay.
So it would have been one of those.
Well, I tell you.
What was yours?
In 1977.
I was 2.5.
I had a Schwinn Apple Crate bike. Do you know what those were?
I know a Schwinn bike.
Okay, Schwinn, right.
He's the famous guy. Is it John Schwinn? How do I know that name? The guy who invented that bike was Schwinn, wasn't he?
Yeah. His name is actually Schwinn.
Yeah.
So the Schwinn, back in the 70s, the Schwinn company had a variety of bikes. They had the big, long, what they called banana seats on them, and the handlebars that came up. And they had a series. One was an apple crate. One was a grape crate. One was an orange crate, obviously the color with the name. And they had shock absorbers on the front and shock absorbers on the back,
Fantastic.
right? Before our mountain bikes had them like we have them today. And I saved up my money. In 1977, I was 13 years old. I was Max's age. And I wanted one of these bikes, but knew they were like $150. They were super expensive.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I could not afford it. And so I saved up my money from cutting grass and cutting snow and stuff for like a year. And I found one used. So I bought it. My dad drove me over to the guy's house, and I think it was $75 or something used, which was still a lot of money for me. So I bought this bike. So fast forward, I wanted to go buy my first record albums. And so I rode across town to the Record Barrel record store.
and I bought my first 3 record albums. Now,
Go
the
on.
first one was the Doobie Brothers, Taking It to the Streets.
Mm.
At the same time, I bought Steely Dan, Asia,
Mm.
and the third, Eric Clapton, Slow Hand.
Mm.
Right, all classic albums, 1977, and so I rode back across town on my Schwinn bike with my record albums. Came home, I had bought a used turntable and my Pioneer tuner and stuff. And I literally wore those albums out.
And that's heaven, isn't it? That you've never known joy
Heaven.
like it. You've got your bike, you've got your
Unbelievable.
records. There's no joy like it, is there? Your life is perfect.
I paid for all of it myself,
Yep.
you know, and I worked hard to scrape up the money for these things. So fast forward to next Wednesday night, the Doobie Brothers are coming here to Singapore.
Fantastic.
Their 50th anniversary, which makes me old as dirt. But anyway, and I cannot wait to go to this concert. I've never seen them in concert before. I can't wait to go, and I hope that they're.
I
gonna
like
play.
the Doobie Brothers, actually. I do. Yeah, I've
like
gotta
listening to music
Yeah.
and you know, there's so many great hits, and they're going to be at the Star Vista Theater. There's still tickets available if anybody wants to go next Wednesday, the 29th, and I'm so excited. You know,
See, I would, at the risk of starting World War III with our listeners, I'm away, obviously, but I'd rather see the Doobie Brothers than Sting,
who was just here last
who was
week.
just here. And
Yeah.
if you're a Sting fan, no problem, that's great. But I just think the Doobie Brothers would be a more fun night. The kind of music they've got, a bit more
Yeah.
dancey, a bit more R&B in places. I just think it would be more fun. That's just my feel. What do you think?
Yeah, well, yes,
You obviously agree. Yes,
I agree. Michael McDonald is they still have most of the original members, with the exception of one guy who left the band in the early 80s, actually. But everybody else is still the original band members.
Great
right?
voice, Michael McDonald.
And they're like 70 years old now.
Great voice, though. a voice of my childhood, Michael McDonald.
Yeah. So, you know, one interesting tidbit that I just learned about them. So back in the day, their bodyguards were the Hells Angels.
Right.
So for some reason, the Hells Angels liked the Doobie Brothers, and I mean, they were, you know, 70s rockers, right? So they were in that whole scene back in the 70s, and the Hells Angels were at Altamont, the Altamont Music Festival. The Doobies were playing there, where the Hells Angels stepped in and actually murdered.
Yeah, that was where the Stones. Was that the one the Stones witnessed it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the Hells Angels will not be at the concert next
No.
Wednesday, but
Not in Singapore.
I didn't know that until just recently, that they were their sort of unofficial bodyguards because they love the Doobies music so much, right?
Wow.
So anyway, lots of fun stories, but I think it's going to be a great show. I know from talking to the promoter, it's a 2-hour plus show.
Of course.
Like, they are going for it. They're going to give all of their, you know, all of the hits, all the songs you love and remember from the Doobie Brothers. So at the Star Vista Theater next Wednesday
and what
night.
about, because Michael McDonald had a few solo hits as well. Will he play those?
Yeah, well, I don't know, but I would imagine. Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, look, they're 70 years old. 50th anniversary. I think they're going to be doing everything they could do.
Yeah.
On stage, and it's actually, this concert next Wednesday is the first leg of their Asia tour for this 70th anniversary. So it should be quite special and quite a lot of fun. I'm sorry you're not going to be here, because
Yeah, I would have gone.
I would have enjoyed going with you and
I would have
bring
gone
the
too.
kids. I'm taking my kids, and
That'll be fun.
yeah,
That'll be a good one.
Good chance to catch up. But you're going to be on your own. You're going to be having some fun yourself.
On my own.
On your own.
I will be in Dubai
Yeah.
for a day or two, and then I'll be in London/Essex, but London mostly, to launch my new book.
Number 28, right?
Yes, number 28. I launch it in the UK first, and then I'll be back to launch it, obviously, in Singapore. I think it comes out in the first week of May here.
Awesome.
So, yeah, international book launches.
That is so exciting. Congratulations in advance on that.
Thank you.
I know you've been wanting to get back there for these launches and things, for, you know, do them up properly, and it's been hard over COVID. You know,
I mean,
get to
the
your
trouble
hometown.
is the hangover of COVID is the book industry and retail stores generally are not what they were.
Sure.
So, yeah, we'll make the best of it and see as many bookstores as we can.
Beautiful. Hey, let's go to a beautiful place. How about it, right?
Let's do it.
Beautiful Places with Neil Humphreys on Weekend Mornings with Glenn Van Zutphen on Money FM 89.3.
And where are we off to today, young Neil?
I step back in time, my friend, to my original kampong, as everybody knows, Toa Payoh, where you and I are sitting right now. This week, the National Heritage Board revamped their Toa Payoh Heritage Trail. And I went along with a healthy dose of skepticism, meaning I've written books about Toa Payoh. Everybody knows I'm from Toa Payoh. I was very much impress me. Tell me something I don't already know. Because if it's a revamped trail, you have to give me and others a reason to do it, right? Fair enough. Well, they gave me loads. I mean, off the top of my head, number one, the location of the first NTUC supermarket in Singapore was Toa Payoh. I had no idea.
Is that right?
Yep. I'm so disappointed.
Where was it?
It's still there.
It's
the one beside Courts.
I hope they've refreshed it in the years.
Not by much, I have to be honest, which I kind of like. It's beside Courts in Toa Payoh Central.
Yeah.
I'm annoyed just for the lack of serendipity. It was actually the second fair price I ever went into in Singapore, but it was my regular one. It's still there. It was so popular when they launched it. They had to close the doors every 2 hours.
What?
To stop overcrowding because they'd never seen anything like it. And it was set up to deal with, coming back to your point, gangster town, Toa Payoh.
Chicago town.
Chicago.
Yep.
A lot of fleecing was going on in Toa Payoh.
Oh, is that right?
A lot of extortion. There's nothing else to call it, from stores, from mini marts and so on. So in response
it
to
was
that,
it was a bare knuckle town in those days, wasn't it?
So almost in response to that, the unions got involved, and so we have to set up a supermarket with fair fixed pricing, hence NTUC fair price. That was first. Number two.
Awesome.
Everybody knows, I would say, the VIP block, the famous VIP block, 19th stories, block 53, where the Queen went, where, Australian Prime Minister John Gorton went, where Singapore's second president, Benjamin Shears, went. It was the block that the PAP took everybody to.
Kind of the poster child, huh?
Very much so, because it was to show there was a cynical element to it. It was to show, look at us, we're open for business. We're an independent nation, but look what we're doing. Look what we're building. So they would take you to the top floor of this round VIP block in the center of Toa Payoh, which is famously where the Queen went. But what was interesting to me, that I knew that. What I didn't know, there was this banjo-shaped road that was literally the VIP road. And there's famous photographs of the Queen's entourage pulling up there.
Okay.
It's still there. It's
that
now
right?
part of the HDB Gardens, and they've just made it a walkway. So when you look down, you can still see the original VIP road that was taken by the Queen and prime ministers and so on. Luckily for me, it was pure coincidence. I happened to be standing beside friend of the show, Jerome Lim, who of course is the heritage guy. He's written books. He was the boy that the Queen met when the Queen went to his flat in this block. And I'm standing outside that very apartment that he lived in as a child. He's now in his late 60s now. And he's showing me, I met the Queen off the lift here. We walked into the apartment here. So that was fantastic. And the third thing, all roads lead back to me. I found a Dagenham connection, which of course is my English hometown.
Yep.
Because on this updated trail, and this is very, very important, it shines a light on the pioneer generation of young factory workers who for the first time were female in Singapore, late 60s. So of course, Toa Payoh, being the first complete HDB town in Singapore, had an industrial component, which is still there. It's much smaller, but it's still there. On that very site, just behind Toa Payoh Central, was the first real factory of, I wouldn't say a healthy number of female factory workers. Now, you cannot underestimate the impact that this female labor force had on early Singapore in the early days of independence. Real trailblazers. And purely coincidentally, at the exact same time, in my hometown, in Dagenham, in East London, of course, famously, an all-female-led group of factory workers organized the world's first all-female industrial strike. So famous, of course, that they made a movie about it called Made in Dagenham. It was at the Ford's Motor Factory. So I just love the spiritual connection between my two hometowns. At exactly the same time, female workers were making real headway in blue-collar work in very different ways, but they were doing it. So I love that. And that's what this new tour does. You get from it what you choose to take. So if, for example, you want childhood memories, you've got the Dragon Playground. If you want religious institutions, you've got the Lian Shan Shuanglin Monastery, the oldest Buddhist monastery in Singapore.
Is that the one that faces the expressway there?
No, that's a different one. I think you're thinking
the
one
real colorful one.
Yeah, that leads in from the CTE. I
Yeah,
think,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's a different one.
Yeah.
But you've also got the Masjid.
The PIE.
Yes, the Muhajirin, the first mosque in Singapore to have been built with the support of contributions from the Mosque Building Fund. Topo Town Park, one of the first HDB parks in Singapore. Even if you want sports, if you've got a sports interest, the first athletic village in Singapore was in Topo for the 1973 Southeast Asian Peninsula Games, then known as the SEAP Games. They've still got some of the blocks where the athletes stayed.
Right. And that's where the track is and the pool
just
and
across,
everything.
literally near the fair price.
Yeah.
So whatever you want, it has it. You've got 29 heritage sites, 10 heritage trail markers. And this to me is what the people's history should be. It should be tactile experiences showcasing the town's people. No more, no less. And that's exactly what the Topo Heritage Trail does so well.
Fantastic. Now, we've got a question. If I'm not wrong, Aloysius Lee says, if I'm not wrong, Topayo was the oldest estate. But what about Queenstown? I thought Queenstown was.
Yes, this comes up a lot. Queenstown is the oldest town, is the oldest housing estate. In fact, it predates independence. There are blocks there that were built by the British, what was then called the SIT, the forerunner to HDB. But Topo is considered the first complete satellite town, meaning all amenities are there. Sports centers, schools, hospitals, clinics, parks, sports stadiums, and so on. So Topo is considered the first complete satellite town with all amenities. But it's a very good question. Thank you. You've gone quiet again. Why have you gone quiet again?
And that is our beautiful place for today.
Beautiful Places with Neil Humphreys on Weekend Mornings with Glenn Van Zutphen on
one from Serotonin. Great name, by the way. Serotonin. For the record, I love the two Angmos hosting this Saturday program.
Thank you, Sarah. You are now our favorite fan.
Glenn is measured in his comments, and Neil relates to us Singaporeans so well. That's very kind of you to say. Thank you. And Aloysius was staying.
But wait, later on she comes in and says,
is there another one?
During part of the program, you talk about abuse of plastics. Just a quick comment. Sarah says, Singapore is a very cosmopolitan and sizable part of the people living in this land. And consuming the resources are not Singaporeans. Maybe you should just say people living in Singapore.
Indeed, that's a fair point.
But the vast majority of people here are Singaporeans.
Yes.
5.5 million versus what, 1 million or a little under 1 million
and when I'm
foreigners.
At my hawker centers, I don't ask to see their passports when I see them drinking bottled water. But I will next time.
Point well taken, though.
Very
Sarah.
well taken.
Thank you for that.
Very well taken. Aloysius Lee, I was staying in Topo, block 45, Lorong 5, from 97 to 99. Aloysius, I was there from 96 to 2006, but I was in Lorongs 8, 1, and 2. Just across from here, of course. One of my blocks was opposite where we are sitting right now in Topo North.
There you go. Talking about our first records, first albums, Jane Eyre, my first LP, of course, for you young kids out there, meaning long play.
Indeed.
Which was a 33 1/3 RPM record versus the small ones, the singles, the 45s.
And it's interesting that some of the jargon still survives today with the young folks. So I'm not entirely sure if they know where it comes from. EP is still used commonly today, but they just mean it's like a little 4-track compilation. But of course, it meant extended play.
Yeah.
LP, EP. Oh, yes.
So Jane's first was Bridge Over Troubled Water, bought by her first pay packet in 1970 from Woolworths.
Art Garfunkel, wasn't it?
Yeah, Simon and Garfunkel.
Simon and Garfunkel.
And
yes.
let's see. Aloysius says, for me, I bought the cassette tape Man of War, King of Metal around 1988.
See, that's quite a cool first album.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I had something like Simply Red or Phil Collins or
he said Shaka Khan.
Shaka Khan's the cooler one. I would say I'm fine with Shaka. Shaka's fine.
All right, folks, we're gonna take a quick music break here. We're gonna throw out a little doobies to you in honor of their concert coming up this Wednesday at the Star Theater, and then back with traffic, and then our good buddy Jason Dacey is going to join us from Down Under in just a minute. Stay with us right here on Money FM Saturday mornings.
Saturday. Traffic.
And let's have a look at the traffic right now. Vehicle breakdown on the TPE towards the PIE at Seletar Link exit. Another one on the TPE towards the PIE after Pongal Road exit. And shall we see the causeways? Oh dear. Woodlands, 55 minutes into JB, 16 into Singapore. At the Tuas Second Link, it's beautiful at the Tuas Second Link. It's clear, it's breezy. It's only 25 minutes into JB and 19 into Singapore. But busy or not busy, this is Singapore, which means we must, as always, maintain lane discipline at all
Lane discipline,
times.
discipline.
Thank you very much. That's your traffic.
If you see anything on the roads that we might have missed, you can share it with us via SMS or WhatsApp at 8855-0893. But please send the message through only when you are safely parked.
Heavy departure traffic at Woodlands Checkpoint due to tailback from Malaysia. Delays are expected and travelers are advised to check traffic conditions before embarking on their journey. Motorists are reminded to maintain lane discipline and cooperate with officers on site. Please follow ICA Facebook for more updates.
Saturday morning, only on Money FM 89.3. Wide World cruising through your weekend on Money FM 89.3.
Money FM 89.3.
Wide World on Money FM 89.3.
Welcome back. Our Wide World segment today. We are going down under with our good friend Jason Dacey joining us to talk about some elections in New South Wales. Jason, great to have you back on the show, my friend. Your original stomping ground back here in Singapore.
How are you, Jason?
Hey guys, we all match. We look like flight attendants with our 89.3 airline.
Pretty. A lot's changed around here since you left, Jason. We now have matching shirts with our names on them and everything. And that pretty high end, isn't it?
Oh yeah, we had a pandemic in between since I left Singapore, and yeah, lots to talk about down under. That's for sure.
Well, the hook here today is this New South Wales state election that's happening this weekend. Conservative Premier is expected to lose, apparently. Tell us, bring us up to speed on that, and frankly, what relevance it is or might be to Singaporeans who are either studying there, having tourism there, whatever.
Well, New South Wales is the most populous state of Australia. It's got roughly a third of the population, about 8.3 million. Sydney is roughly the same size as Singapore, around 5.5 million. So you've got the Conservative government of Dominic Perrottet from the Liberal National Party and Chris Minns from the Labor Party. And one of the big issues here is gambling. And we know that Singaporeans are massive gamblers, as are Australians. And the poker machines here are really out of control. So the thing here that's really interesting is that Dominic Perrottet, who's the Premier from the Conservative Party, has come up with a plan for a cashless gaming card, which means that Australians in the state of New South Wales potentially won't lose as much money on the poker machines. And every year, $95 billion is lost in New South Wales poker machines. New South Wales has 100,000 poker machines. Only Nevada in the US has more poker machines. So his plan is a cashless gaming card. That means that people would have to say how much they're prepared to lose, and instead of putting money through the poker machines, you pay in advance, get the card. And this is actually a very big election issue here, because we all know about the out of control gambling and the damage that can cause in society, whether it's here in Australia, whether it's in Singapore or anywhere else.
It is extraordinary, Jason. I remember seeing something a few years ago that per head of population, it was actually Australia and Singapore that had the highest gambling rates in the world. I don't know if that figure still stands, but, the poker machines, as they're called there, are known as jackpot machines, as you know, in Singapore. And it really is endemic, Jason, isn't it? When I lived there, for 5 years, retirees, who can sometimes be the most vulnerable, folks out of work, they would spend hours upon hours upon hours in these jackpot places.
Yeah, I mean, you lived in Geelong in Victoria near Melbourne. I'm living now in Queensland, but I grew up in Sydney. And I lived abroad for 25 years, including almost 20 years in Singapore. And the one thing that I noticed when I went back to Australia, and this was just before the pandemic, was just how big a part gambling is in society and how much it had changed in the 25 years I was away. I'll give you a couple of examples. When you sit down to watch a sporting match, whether it's AFL or rugby or soccer, immediately they'll come on and say, fancy a bet, jump on now and bet. Shaquille
Really?
O'Neal. Yes, Shaquille O'Neal, arguably the biggest name in the NBA, is doing gambling ads, encouraging people to bet. And that just shows you that in our society here in Australia, the gambling companies have the most money. So all the best ads on TV are gambling ads. And everywhere we look, there are reminders to gamble. And my daughter's 13. She's at school. And already at school, they're talking about gambling and the Melbourne Cup's a holiday. Can you get a bet on?
What?
So it's such a big part of society. Well, I mean, it's not the teachers saying that, but the kids at school are talking about it because it's in your face. It's really in your face.
Glenn, it's the only place where a horse race literally stops the nation. As Jason knows, that's the slogan, the race that stops the nation, the Melbourne Cup. And it literally does, Jason, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the second Tuesday in November. I can remember, growing up and, the TV would come in around 2:20 in the afternoon, would all watch the horse race. Can you imagine that happening in Singapore or anywhere else? So this is a big part of this state election. And really, Chris Minns, who's the challenger, who's likely to win from the Labor Party, he's kind of hedged his bets in New South Wales about what he's going to do about the out-of-control problem of gambling, because the lobby, the lobby of the clubs where the gambling takes place is so strong. And there are all sorts of arguments, and Neil will be familiar with this, having lived in Victoria, that they always say, well, look, you get lots of jobs from these clubs that have the poker machines and other forms of gambling. We give a lot of money to charities. So there are all these arguments, and you've got very influential members of Australian society standing up for gambling.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the Conservative Premier, because I think Singaporeans will be astonished by this. Something to do with dressing up in a Nazi costume. Now, the reason I bring that up, Jason, is because just this week, maybe it was last weekend, you probably saw that in Melbourne, I think it was an anti-transgender protest, but there were folks, Glenn, men, hooded, dressed up in Nazi costumes, doing the Nazi salute in the middle of Melbourne, which seems quite extraordinary. So, this Nazi symbolism hasn't quite gone away, Jason.
It hasn't, Neil. And again, I'm looking at society here compared to when I used to live here in the 90s, being away for 25 years. And one thing that I've really seen with the society here, it's very polarized. You have a very strong left wing here and a very strong right wing. And you mentioned the protest there in Melbourne with the Nazi salutes. And the story around the Premier, Dominic Perrottet, he's 40 years old. He's come from a very strong Catholic background. He's got 7 kids. But on his 21st birthday, he dressed up in a Nazi uniform. And this actually came out a couple of months ago ahead of the election, and he actually admitted it. We never saw the photograph, but this is something that he did growing up in Sydney when he was 21. Now, probably there are some really silly photos of me when I was 21 and celebrating my party, and I'd say the same for you, Glenn and Neil.
I've seen you at some of those parties. Jason, I've seen you at some of those parties. I know for a fact there are some silly photos, although I don't ever remember you in any army of any nation gear. Yeah. So anyway, but carry on.
Yeah, well, what I'd say is that I actually think Dominic Perrottet is a decent premier, and he's actually taken over from Gladys Berejiklian, who was the former premier, female premier, and she did a really good job in the pandemic. Then there was a corruption scandal. She had a romance with someone who had some pretty dodgy dealings, living in Wagga Wagga, the famous town. And then Dominic Perrottet took over as premier in late 2021. So he's never won an election before. But when you compare Dominic Perrottet and Chris Minns, they're both sort of early 40s. They're very, very similar. And the whole campaign's been very civil, and it's very hard to kind of choose the difference. And this is often the way with elections these days. It tends to go more to the center to hope to get the independent voters.
Wow. I was going to say, I remember exactly what I wore when I was 21 on my 21st birthday. I dressed as a woman. We all went out at university as a woman, as women, and I've never forgot it because a lovely, young, attractive woman said, "You might be the most ugliest woman I've ever seen, but you've got legs that most women would kill for." But I've never run for parliament, so it doesn't matter, does it?
You never will.
And I never will, probably for that reason.
Hey, Jason, what is the result of this election? What is it? is it likely going to have any impact on Singaporeans who are maybe taking a trip to Sydney, or any Singaporean students who are studying in Sydney at Macquarie or any of the other schools, University of Sydney? Is it likely the government makeup likely to have any impact on anyone's daily lives from here?
Well, both sides would say yes to that question, Glenn, because there is a big problem about affordability for people like foreign students in Sydney. And another thing that's happened here in Australia, just like Singapore, the cost of living has gone through the roof, rents are going through the roofs. And it's very, very hard for Australians, whether they're, someone that's grown up there like me, or like a Singaporean student, or someone that's working there, to get affordable accommodation. And in my hometown of Sydney, it has become an absolute nightmare to get by. Even like the tolls, it will cost you $20 to go one way to work, just paying tolls to go through tunnels. You'll have to live way out in the suburbs, an hour and a half away. So this is something that both sides say, well, we're going to try and fix the cost of living crisis. And with our interest rates here, we've seen 10 consecutive rate rises from a 0.1% just over a year ago, and now we're up to 3.6% in our interest rate. So just like Singapore, a lot of parallels. But to be honest, Glenn, I don't think we're going to see any major difference regardless of who wins this state election that's actually underway now. We should know the result tonight, Singapore time.
So it'll just be expensive, right? It continue to be expensive to travel there as a tourist and stay in a hotel or rent a car or whatever. And or if you're a student looking for housing, the prices will be high, right? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, the prices will be high. And even regional centres where, Singaporeans may be studying, like Newcastle or Wollongong, they've got expensive as well. These are cities roughly, 2 hours away from Sydney. So the whole state of New South Wales is in a bit of a crisis at the moment when it comes to cost of living. And I would say that my hometown of Sydney has some really tough times ahead, given how expensive housing is, whether you're a homeowner or renting. It is so expensive. I would say more expensive than Singapore, one of the most expensive cities in the world, according to all those cost of living indexes.
Yeah, I've read that. That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fascinated more broadly, Jason. I constantly hear from friends of mine who live in Victoria, where I used to live, that my house that I sold is now worth double what it was when I sold it. And
Darn it.
I still can't sleep at night for worrying about that. But no, seriously, what impact is it having more broadly? I've read some of the stories coming out of Australia: cost of living, inflation, interest rates, post-pandemic economic issues, and so on. What is it like more broadly now in Australia?
I mean, like from the society
economic standpoint.
Yeah.
I think so far, Neil, we haven't seen the full impact of it, because a lot of people got these really cheap interest rates in a fixed term for about 4 years. And I was one of these people buying the house that I'm in now. But a lot of those people are going to come off at fixed rates of, maybe below 2% this year, in the next 6 to 12 months. So I would say we're probably going to see more hardship coming up. I don't want to be a doomsayer here, but, already we're struggling to get by when it comes to going shopping. But I think it's going to get a lot worse in the 6 to 12 months ahead because of these interest rate rises that will be passed on in terms of our mortgage repayments.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, and everywhere we're seeing the divide between between haves and have-nots widen. Countries around the world, and that too, we may not know the full extent of that just yet, but that will certainly have some kind of impact in Australia. Would you think, Jason?
Yeah, I think so, Glenn. And you coming from the Chicago area of the US, and you looking at all those trends in the US that you speak with Steve Oken about every week, we are seeing a lot of that here. And that does concern me, that we are seeing more of the rise of nationalism, of kind of right-wing parties as well. And the fact, my cousin, he's actually a minister, and he says in the old days, people would just sit around the table and respect each other's opinions. But now people won't even talk to each other around the Christmas table or the dinner table when you have relative gatherings. So I think that's the concern, that we are aping a lot of the trends that we are seeing in the US here in Australia. And as I said, I kind of look at my country in a bit of a different way, because I lived abroad for so long, and I realize how difficult things are now for Australians compared to when I was growing up. I mean, even small things like, in Sydney when I was a young adult, there was cheap eats. You could be like the hawker centers in Singapore, where you could go out and get a meal under $10. That's all gone. No one ever talks about cheap eats in Sydney or across New South Wales. It's all gone. It's become so expensive.
So you're still tight-fisted then, Jason, is basically what you're saying.
I'm like you, Neil. Yes. I think we have that in
Very
common.
pleased to hear it. Very pleased to
I
hear
am proud to know two of the most frugal people on this planet.
Yeah, one thing that you're not, Glenn, you're not frugal. I think I've learned a lot from you in terms of living life to the full and enjoying life while you can.
To my fault.
Which is why I'm richer than both of you. Anyway, moving on. More positive news. The World Cup is going to be a big thing. The World Cup, the Women's Soccer World Cup is coming there. Even my daughter keeps talking about it. That's going to be a massive boost economically and culturally, you would hope, coming in this summer into Australia.
Yeah, Australia and New Zealand, actually, Neil. It's been co-hosted by Australia and New Zealand. Yeah, I mean, football's on a high here because the Socceroos did a lot better than everyone expected at the last World Cup. Won 2 matches in the groups and then lost 2-1 to eventual champions Argentina in the round of 16. There was a game last night. They beat Ecuador, a South American team, 3-1 in a friendly. Yeah, there's a real spirit. Another thing that I've noticed since coming back, that women's sport is suddenly on TV. It's getting sponsorship. You know, people are out there, and you know, whether it's your daughter or my daughter, Neil, or yours, Glenn, there are suddenly pathways for women to play elite sport, which is fantastic. And you know, even my daughter, you know, she's playing netball and basketball, and she's about to play volleyball. Suddenly she can see role models, whether it's the Matildas, which is the national women's soccer team, which will be obviously one of the co-hosts of the 2023 Women's World Cup. So I think that's a great thing. So yeah, the comparisons of when I used to be here back in the 90s, no one really talked about women's sport at an elite level. And now it's on TV and it's part of our lives.
Yeah. Jason, real quick, you're going to be back in Singapore in a couple of months' time, right? In May, I believe.
I know. Yeah, it's been 3.5 years since I've taken an international flight, and I am coming back to Singapore. I've got my ticket. And, you know, a lot of Singaporeans out there are probably wondering about the costs of flights. And I picked up a very reasonable price ticket, just over $1,000, and not on a budget airline, on a full service airline. Yeah, so it's been a strange few years, hasn't it? You know, when we look back since the start of the pandemic, that was the last time that I was in Singapore in January of 2020. The world's changed a lot, and it's kind of a bit of a blur. And in some ways, it seems like a long, long time, and in other ways, it seems like a very short time.
Yeah. Well, we'll look forward to having you back here, Jason. Look forward to having a reunion when you return. We got to leave it there for now, though. Jason Dacey, founder of Cockatoo Media, ABC News journalist. Thanks for being with us again, my friend.
Thank you, guys. I look forward to having an inexpensive economic rice meal with you.
I'll pay for it. I'll pay for it.
We'll go to your favorite vegetarian place in Little India.
All the best to the family, Jason.
Paper, okay? See you guys.
All the best to the family. You take care.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Wide World on Money FM 89.3.
Have Jason on the show, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Good to see Jason.
Yeah.
Good sport. He kick-started this show off, of course.
Yeah.
You and I would not
5
be
years
here.
ago. Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was a pioneer of this very weekend morning show. It'll be good to see him back in Singapore.
He had you on as an occasional guest. He had me on as an occasional guest, and sometimes host when he was off doing other things. And all of this now is ours. This kingdom.
Well,
this fiefdom.
I think I was only supposed to be on for half an hour or an hour, and I just didn't shut up.
You just didn't stop.
I just
like Neil, the door's there.
I just spread it to other shows, and I was just everywhere.
And any of our wonderful listeners who have been listening at all for the past couple of years would know it is really hard to get you to stop talking.
I know. Jeez, I'm getting it today, aren't I? My word.
Anyway.
It's all good fun.
Hey, what do you got going on this weekend before your departure next week? Busy weekend for you? Wrapping things up?
Basically that, packing. I've got to come back in here. I've got to do some writing and record some podcasts and shows and things before I go. Yeah, and then I fly off on Monday night. Yeah. So just the usual packing and eating and preparing and usual things.
Awesome.
What about you?
Awesome. We're going to head over actually as a family. We're going to go eat at Newton Hawker Center tonight. We haven't been there. They've just refurbished it
again
and reopened it.
All right.
Yep.
Okay.
It was closed for about 6 months.
I didn't know that.
And so we're going to go over and grab some Indian. We like the Indian stall.
I do.
Over there.
I've had Indian there a few
It's very
times.
good. It is one of the more expensive hawker stands because it's the one that all the tourists like to go
Yeah,
to.
it's a very touristy place.
But it happens to be in our neighborhood, so it's easy for us to just walk over there. So we're going to do that. Tomorrow, Sentosa in the morning for Kate's volleyball. And then I've actually booked a staycation for us. I got because of my Amex credit card, I got 2 free nights stays at the Hilton, the new Hilton on Orchard Road.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm going to use those for one night for 2 rooms.
Nice.
For me and the family. So
which night is this?
Sunday night.
Oh yeah, because you're off school.
The kids are off school next week.
Right,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah.
That'll be nice. That'll be fun.
Yeah. So we'll stay down in that area. We'll maybe go over to the Shaw Lido, catch a movie, eat some food around town, just kind of hang out in Orchard.
That's a very fun thing.
Why not, right?
Absolutely. Why
Because
not?
honestly, I don't know when else I would use a hotel room night at the Orchard Hilton. I just don't need it.
Speaking of hotels, at some point you do need to give me some tips on Chicago.
I will do so.
When you
get there,
I'll fly in there, and then after that, it's up to you.
You got it.
It's no pressure.
No problem. Hey, I will be back next weekend. Neil will be off to Points Known for his 28th book launch in the UK, but I'll be back, and I'll have a couple of guest hosts with me. I believe Steve will be on with us as well from the US. And so we'll carry the show on next Saturday.
I might call into the show at about 11:35.
I
don't know.
I'd love to have you. I mean, and you're most welcome. I just kind of was worried about the time difference.
Well, the clocks go back or forward, whichever way it is. Forward, I think, in the UK this weekend, which will make it 7 hours. So let me think about that.
Well, yeah, but you're you're always totally welcome to jump in.
Just now, you
Happy
couldn't
to.
shut me up. Now you want me to talk more.
I'm just being polite.
Yeah,
Okay.
I won't bother then. You can stick your offer.
All right, everybody. Hey, we hope you all have a great weekend. It's going to be a little bit wet probably in the afternoons, but have a good Saturday and Sunday, and hope that you'll all join us again next week.
Yes, have a great weekend, guys, and I will see you all when I get back from my jet-setting, book-launching travels. Take care. Stay safe.
Yep. And if any of you go to the Doobies concert on Wednesday, have a look for me, and I'll be happy to say hi to you, and we get some selfies going and that sort of thing too if you are around. Doobies on Wednesday night at the Star Theater. Okay, take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.
It's the weekend. Time to play with Money FM 89.3.